Welcome everybody to the SimGrid and the Kyalami Mini Series, the start of a new series of racing, all based at the famous Kyalami circuit in South Africa. We've got some brilliant racing on its way to you, not just tonight, but over the next couple of weeks. 2 races tonight, 2 in a week's time, and then it will all finish with a longer endurance race in 3 weeks to crown the Kyalami Mini Series champion. We've got, as I said, a pair of 30-minute races tonight with very much an Italian flavour. The first of these races will be for the Lamborghini Super Trofeo cars, one-make race for those machines, and then we move into another 30-minute race, this time for the big brother of the Super Trofeo, the Huracan GT3 Evo. All of the drivers in exactly the same cars, on the same track. It all comes down to pure driver skill. And that, honestly, is how it should be. Andy McEwan up here in the commentary box, delighted to be working with for the first time David Christie. David, good evening. Are you as excited about this one as I am?
Oh, good evening, Andy. Yeah, absolutely over the moon for this one. It's going to be such a great race. 2 races tonight with the Huracan GT3 Evo coming up later on this evening, but it's louder, younger, shoutier brother, the Lamborghini Super Trofeo. Bit of a handful, and some of these drivers tonight have never driven the Super Trofeo in anger, and the words that I'm hearing is fun but wild.
I will admit I had a bit of a go actually in the Super Trofeo car earlier on this afternoon, and yeah, I didn't gel with it particularly. It's quite lively. It's amazing actually, isn't it, how particularly if you're used to racing the full-blown GT3 cars, making that step back into the Super Trofeo, or as they will have to next week, into the GT3 Porsche 991 Cup car, that lack of downforce you've got, the lack of traction control and general grip that you have, it takes quite a while to get your head around it, doesn't it?
It certainly does. It's not the refined experience of your typical GT3 car, which are aimed more to be easier for your gentleman drivers to slip in and out of, whereas these things are absolute hooligans around the track. Really, really do enjoy them. I'm absolutely terrible at them. I don't even give them a go because I am just so bad at them, but it's certainly a fun experience, and racing them in a pack is going to be great fun tonight.
Yeah, I think so, and it's an interesting entry list, isn't it, as well, because we've got quite a few names that regulars here on the SimGrid will recognise from other competitions. There are some that never seem to miss the opportunity to come and race with the SimGrid, but then we've also got those that are perhaps making their debuts, or certainly the first time that I personally have seen them racing. It's going to be interesting, isn't it, to see who the pace setters are and how close to the pace some of these new drivers are as well.
Absolutely. It's the one thing that I love about these Thursday nights, is the fact that it gives us a chance to see some of the drivers that we maybe don't see week in, week out here at the SimGrid. It's a chance to give a little bit of exposure to the rest of our community. Perhaps it's drivers who have maybe done our daily races and fancy getting themselves into the big time, or some of the drivers who maybe race in some of the lower splits. But certainly a lot of new names tonight, and a lot of names that we've seen, like I said, more often on the daily races, but we haven't seen them in this top split. So great chance for them to get a little bit of fun as well. That's what it's all about. And with the fact that this is a paid entry series as well, Andy, of course there's a little bit of a prize pool. Not anything massive, but enough to get you some beers and enjoy a little poiky at the end of the season with the boys.
Yes, which, as far as I'm concerned, is reason enough to come and do a bit of racing on a Thursday evening. If there are prizes like that up for grabs, then why not give it a go? All of these races, as the name of the series, the Kyalami Mini Series might suggest, all of these races taking place at the Kyalami circuit, which is one of my personal favourites, David. I don't know about you, because it really does combine a little bit of everything. It's got some high-speed sections, lots of these tight technical corners as well. It's quite bumpy, it's quite narrow, but it does generally produce good racing, doesn't it?
It certainly does. Kyalami is one of the just quintessential GT3 tracks. It's one of those underdogs. We don't hear it a lot, but we are starting to hear it more and more with the circuit's resurgence. It was very quiet during the 80s and 90s, but it really has come back to life here in the 2010s with its return to GT3 racing. So it's great to see that. Some wonderful corners here, but I think it's the mix of corners and its high speed nature. You know, once you come out that final corner at Ingwe, it's all the way down towards the kink and then up to Crowthorne at that first left-hander. It is such a fast, you know, death-defying run down towards that first corner. Then you go up through the Juxey sweep and then through Barbecue turn 3. Honestly, it is just such a wonderful chunk, and such a wide track as well. Plenty of overtaking opportunities, plenty of you know, last gasp efforts, plenty of chances for drivers to just absolutely fire it in. None more so than Luke up halfway around the track as you come towards the run back down the hill towards the late stages of the circuit. But as you can see here, free practice coming to an end. Drivers in the moment getting their driver's briefing. They've got the dulcet tones of our very own Michael Hamlet roaring at them over the airwaves here, telling them what is expected of them tonight, Andy. And the one thing that I love about Thursday nights is that, as I say, it can get a little bit more fighty than we normally see at the weekends.
Yeah, especially when you then factor in this sort of range of experience that we have on the grid. You know, there are going to be those that will obviously want to make their mark on the series right from the get-go, and I tend to find that one-make categories, as much as I love GT3 racing, and we get a lot of that here on the SimGrid, and I love the variety of the cars, and you know, it's fantastic, but there's something about one-make racing, because it's all in the hands of the drivers. The cars are all identical. Yes, you can tweak the setup, but generally it's all down to individual driver ability that will make the difference. It makes it harder to overtake because the competition is that much tighter, and that therefore generates fairly lively racing generally, and that will also mean that qualifying, which is coming up momentarily, is really, really important. The drivers have a 15-minute qualifying session before each of the two races tonight, so your result from the first race in the Lamborghini Super Trofeo cars bears no impact whatsoever on your grid position for the second race in the Huracan GT3 Evo. So if it all goes a bit wrong in race 1, you've still got another 15-minute qualifying session then to try and get yourself a decent track position for that second race. But yeah, this qualifying session will be important. Not a particularly long session though, is it, David? 15 minutes around a circuit like this. You've got a big grid of cars as well, so getting yourself a bit of clear track is not going to be the work of a moment. I think the drivers that are on it right from the word go, get themselves that bit of clear track and get into the rhythm quickly, they're the ones that should appear at the front of the grid.
That's exactly the case, and also, you know, because these cars are so wildly different, Andy, it really is going to come down to those who have put in the hours beforehand, getting used to these different cars. As we've said, quite a few of the drivers a little bit new to the Super Trofeos, but they're more happy with the GT3s and their Evo counterparts. But all the talking aside, it looks like we are green flag for qualifying, Andy, so time to get some lap times in.
Yes, now the other thing that's worth mentioning, as you can see at the top of the screen, is it is a very early start time in Sim. The time is 4:15 AM in Kyalami, so that means, well, apart from anything, visibility is not ideal, although you can see there is a little bit of daylight even at this early time in the morning. We're going to be qualifying and racing through the sunrise, which makes it pretty, if nothing else. But it means that the track temperature and ambient temperature are quite low, just 15 degrees at the moment. That is ideal for quick lap times. The engines are more efficient at lower temperature, the tyres hang on a little bit longer as well, the track has more grip in it. I'd say this is pretty much in the optimal range actually for track temperature as far as having a grippy surface underneath them. So we should see some really quick lap times, and as we then progress into and through the first race in particular, track temperature will start to go up, and it will be interesting to see what effect that has on the lap times as well. David Fong there we're seeing in the number 57 car working his way through this middle sector. You can see actually on the track map on the right hand side there, David, a few drivers still not out of the pit lane. That looks like a tactical choice to me. They're foregoing the first couple of minutes of the session in the hope that they can get some of that elusive track space.
It's a bold strategy. I'd certainly want to be out there as soon as possible, given how crowded that track is going to be. It's very difficult to get track space there. In fact, I think it's just the one car that I see at the moment not out on track, and that is the number 12 there of Simon Wilkes. Yeah, it's not the strategy I'd be going for, but certainly it could be that they're just wanting to wait and see. Certainly what to expect for qualifying is in the first 5 minutes the drivers are just going to be getting out used to the conditions. Certainly when they've been doing the practice laps, they'll not have been expecting the time to be as early as this. So when they do go down, the track temperature obviously much colder. It's a very warm climate here in South Africa, both in the virtual world and in the real world as well. But on track there, you can see that track condition, although it's clear, it's only fast. So it's not at its optimum state, which will happen in the next sort of couple of hours. But first 5 minutes they'll be putting in some banker laps, getting the feel for the traction and the way that the car works, and then with about sort of 6 minutes, 7 minutes to go, that's when they're going to be firing in those really, really fast lap times. So yellow flags is going to be another thing to consider. Tracks, cars coming off track, rejoining the track, and possibly hampering some of the cars on fast laps as well. So lots to watch for, and I don't think there's going to be a moment to breathe.
No, I think you're probably right on that one, David, because if you make a mistake around Kyalami, generally speaking, you're going to end up on the grass or in the gravel, which can lead to a spin. You might even end up in one of these Armco barriers or tyre walls. You can see we're riding on board here with Rob Tamplin through Cheetah, the penultimate corner, into Ingwe, this tight uphill left-hander. It's so tempting to take too much speed in there, but he did that nicely, accelerates across the start-finish line, and Rob Tamplin hopefully is about to register our benchmark time for 1 minute 45.4, which is immediately beaten then by the number 369 car, and that is another familiar name here on the SimGrid. Alexander Novikov is now gone to the top of the tyres, but as David said, it's likely that these will not be the fastest laps of the session. They want to get a lap in now, just in case something goes wrong. They make a mistake, they go off, damage the car, or indeed start exceeding track limits. That is sometimes an issue here, especially through the Crocodiles, which is this sequence of corners that we're seeing the 787 Philip Babulal going through. If you run a bit too wide over that exit curb through either of those two right-handers, that will disallow your lap time immediately. Philip then comes into the final turn, and where is he going to factor into all of this? He's got a bit of a slipstream actually from the car ahead of him. Not that that's going to give you a huge benefit around a circuit like this, but it is good enough to put him 7th quickest at the moment, just over a second off the pace. It's Christian Lozanov that's now gone to the top, 144.43, with the 71 of Felix Rupert right behind him. 0.2 of a second between the two of them. Novikov 3rd, and we're still seeing a few others that have not yet logged their first lap time. Scott Ticehurst here, one of the British drivers on the grid, 14th after his first effort, but I think we'll see these times start to tighten up as we move through the middle portion of the session.
What we'll also see is the drivers that are possibly, over a second and a half, as you said, tightening up. But what you'll also see is, again, them just spinning that roulette wheel, trying to see if they feel brave and if they fancy getting a chance. And you're also going to see frustration and temper start to flare, because this is one of those tracks, Andy, that really punishes you as a driver, especially with this car. Probably none more so than with this car, where if you overdrive the car, it will just refuse to play ball and will either send you spiriting off into the nearest barrier via oversteer, or actually locking up the brakes and understeering off the circuit. So either way is going to damage your qualifying effort there. And watch for some names that we would imagine seeing up the top actually losing out on this.
Well, yes, because I think that's an interesting point, actually. Oops, there's a car there that Dave Jr. just had to dodge as it ran a bit wide, coming through the penultimate corner there. Cheetah, let's just get this lap time across the line before I start that point. Dave Jr. was 13th. This looks like a decent lap. Yes, jumps into the top 5 now, less than half a second off pole position. Errol Verwey will be one of the next quick drivers coming through. He's actually 4th, just ahead at the moment. Callum Boyd goes through and goes 15th place. We are going to continue to see these improvements. Because there are a select few drivers, I think it's fair to say, who are expected to be the pace setters, it would be easy maybe for some of those drivers to come into this first qualifying session and think, well, I don't really have to try all that hard. I'm pretty much guaranteed to qualify in the top 5 and score some good points. But if you relax too much, of course, that can be your undoing. Errol Verby there didn't improve. I'm not sure whether he exceeded track limits out of the final corner then. He was certainly using a lot of the curb on the exit. Stays in 5th place for now. But yeah, just because you're being tipped as one of the favourites, David, doesn't mean that you can take things easy.
It absolutely doesn't, and that's the problem, is that you're almost tying a noose around your own neck with the pressure. I mean, we saw there Christian Lozanov up at the top of the table there. He's got incredible form, obviously won the GT4 part of the very recent German Cup that we did here at the SimGrid as well, and amongst many other championships that he's been in. He's obviously taken part tonight in the Kyalami Series, but won the Academy Cup that we did last year, took part in the multi-class at Spa. It's a fantastic ability to be able to take part in all of these championships, and actually it's one of the it showcases another thing that we don't really get to talk about much here at the SimGrid as well, is that driver profile system. The fact that as commentators, Andy, we can kind of go to the website, click on the driver's name, and their entire history here at the SimGrid is at our fingertips. So, you know, some of these drivers have been racing with us for many months now, and others who are brand new. It's fantastic to have that information at our fingertips, but it also, you know, allows us even to add to that pressure almost, because we can kind of big up some of the drivers who we expect to do very well based on their previous performances. But this ST really is an equaliser. It doesn't matter if you're God's gift to sim racing. This will sort out the wheat from the chaff, as they say.
Yeah, most definitely. That's the joy of a class of car like this. Harry Phillips about to come through then and log another lap. We've seen a few changes at the top of the times though, haven't we, now, as Harry really flirts with exceeding track limits there. In fact, I think that was invalidated, that lap. He ran a bit too wide out of the final corner. So 8th place is where he will stay. Now, Christian Lozanov was on pole position last time we mentioned him. He's now been demoted to 3rd because Felix Rupert has gone quickest, and then 2nd fastest has gone the number 42 of Patrick Nage. Here, though, is Lozanov, and he's on a better lap. He needs to find about 3.5 tenths of a second to get that pole position back. It's going to be tight looking at the sector times. Bit of traffic just up the road. He shouldn't catch it before the lap is over. Into the final corner. Now, don't miss your braking point. Don't get on the throttle too early. Don't open that steering up too early either and end up over the curb. It's going to be really tight for pole position. This Christian Lozanov across the start-finish line then was 3rd, goes to pole by 24 1/1000ths of a second. Well, we said it was going to be close, and close it absolutely is. And with Rupert and Nage having both just left the pit lane, actually, David, they have left themselves not a lot of time at all to retaliate.
Yeah, this is where it really starts to count. This is where you start seeing the times coming in left, right and centre. Rob Taplin, for example, here in the NSNX World Things Racing 214, making his way around. He's got a second to bring back. I mean, that is going to be a Herculean effort to get inside the top 5 with that. But again, it sounds worse than it is, because he only has to get half a second, and half a second round here at Kyalami, absolutely nothing. Harry Phillips is another man on the move in the 26 machine. He's currently half a second up. He's got a good toe actually there from, I think that's Barberi that is in the 56. It is in front of him, coming through the final corner just now. Phillips up, what was that, half a second. That would put him up into to 3rd place if he hasn't invalidated that lap. It wasn't 6th, so he lost some time in that final section of the circuit there, Andy. And again, it just shows you how quickly you can go from 0 to 0 on your delta times.
Yeah, you had the same thought as me, I think, there, as Harry came out of the final corner. He was within inches, I think, there, maybe 1 inch of invalidating that lap time by running a bit too wide out of the final corner. Thankfully, he just about managed to avoid that, and so he does now jump up to 6th place. Christian Lozanov then is your provisional pole sitter, with Rupert in 2nd, Nage 3rd, Alexander Novikov in 4th. It's pretty tight, actually, isn't it, really? We've got the top 11 drivers covered by less than, or it was by less than 1 second, but then Christian Lozanov went quicker again. He wasn't happy with having such a narrow advantage at the top of the times, so he's now over a 10th and a half quicker. Felix Rupert, though, back out on track. He's just completed an outlap. He's left himself 3.25 minutes here to try and find some improvement. Into the first corner he goes then, which is, well, technically turn 2. The kink, the flat-out right-hander, is turn 1. Crowthorne there, turn 2. And now through the Gypsy Sky sweep into Barbecue, one of my favourite corner names in World Motorsport. That a really satisfying corner when you get it right, which he did. He hit the apex perfectly, ran just the right amount over the exit curb, and now makes his way past the old pit lane into Sunset. This really, really high-speed right-hander. You've got to feather the throttle. These cars can be prone to a bit of understeer. There's a car in the barriers there on the left-hand side, which I'm not quite sure who that is, but whoever it is, they're going no further. 545 possibly it was that was just rejoining. That would have been Christian Lozanov, wouldn't it, who has just headed to the pit lane. That's interesting. So the pole sitter then off track and probably doesn't have time to get back out there. David, though, this looks like a pretty decent lap for Rupert here. He's over halfway through. No obvious mistakes that I've seen.
Yeah, it's looking very smooth, very cool, calm and collected, and this is exactly what you want to see. We should be used to this sort of performance from Felix Rupert because, of course, part of that Excel Racing by Renvelten team, and this is where the frustration comes in. You've got cars rejoining on track, and that is enough, if not to disturb you, it's enough to distract you because it's in your peripheral vision while it's going right. But here's Alexander Novikov for TN Racing in the 369 machine. He was half a second behind. He was improving, but it wasn't enough. Rupert runs a little bit wide on that final corner. Can he get across? He gets across the line, but it's not enough to improve. And again, this is where I said the frustration comes in, Andy, because if that car rejoining the track might not, fair enough, it might not directly impede you, but it's enough to distract you out the corner of your eye and throw your concentration off.
Yeah, because you just don't know what that driver is going to do. In an ideal world, they'll take it nice and easy, as Max Grimes does the exact opposite of that, and has a big, big moment out of the final corner. He had been 4/10 up on his previous best, but unsurprisingly, that mistake at the last turn has completely ruined that effort that he was on. But yes, in an ideal world, a car that is rejoining the track in front of you will be gentle on the throttle and not bounce over a curb and not lose control, but you just never know. In their eagerness to get back on the road, they could end up spinning right across your path. Rob Taplin here will be thinking similar thoughts to that, I'd imagine, because he's got a group of cars just ahead of him, and he is on for a personal best lap time here. He's into the final sector now, comes through the mine shaft into the Crocodiles. Got to get this braking point absolutely spot on, which he does. Uses just the right amount of curb on the exit. 2 more corners to go. He's thinking, please don't delay me, traffic, don't get in my way. I don't think he's quite going to catch them, but he needs to be careful out of this final corner. 15th place at the moment then for Rob Taplin. He'll have time for one more lap. Very neat and tidy out of the final corner. He was about 4/10 up on his previous best lap. He finds even more, goes to 7th place as Alexander Novikov comes across the line from 6th position. He goes 2nd and just misses out on pole position by 75 1,000ths of a second. It couldn't be much closer.
Oh, that's absolutely gut-wrenching. When you put a lap like that in, you see the delta going down and down and down, and you're getting happier and happier, and it's still not enough. But Novikov still gets another bite off the cherry. Gerhard Volzer for Volzer Motorsport coming round the Crocodile just now through the final couple of corners. He's going to be trying to get himself into the top 10, and that is going to be a huge improvement because he's going to have to take, nearly 2.9 seconds, maybe a little less, maybe about 2.8, but wild improvement if it's going to be there for Sader. He's trying his best to get up there. I think it might only be enough for 25th or 26th, and he goes into the 26th. Volzer, though, up into the top 10. 8th position, Carlo Barberi for Ada Pro Esport has a little bit of a wiggle, and this is exactly what you were saying there, Andy. These cars are unforgiving. They will just bite you at the most inopportune time if you don't show them constant respect. Thomas Ehrentraut for the 999 outfit comes up and bumps Volzer down into 9th place. Denise Pope for the NSNX Wild Things Racing currently down in 30th, improves up to 28th, but at the moment we're just seeing slow gains at the moment.
Yes, and in fact I think we're done now for gains because the qualifying session is over, but well, if the races are half as exciting as that 15 minutes of qualifying was, we're in for a very entertaining night, that's for sure. Our first race then for the Kyalami Mini Series, just a few moments away, and qualifying sees pole position taken by less than a tenth of a second. It bodes well for some close competition, and you know, sometimes that can be the difference between winning and losing, can't it? Christian Lozanov there with that really narrow advantage over Alexander Novikov in second. Felix Rupert was third, Errol Verby fourth. Patrick Nage down in fifth. I think he'll be a bit disappointed about that. He did improve on his final lap, but he was on course perhaps to improve even more earlier in the session, and that went begging. Regan Mitchell will be sixth, Rob Taplin seventh. Then it's Thomas Ehrentrau, who we followed across the line towards the end of the session, in eighth. Gerhard Walzer is ninth, and Carlo Barberi will round out that top 10, but it's a big grid of cars, and there are going to be some juicy battles, I think, up and down the order. We're focusing, understandably, I think, in qualifying on the top 10 or so, but the great thing about this series, I think, David, is that we've got this really big entry. Yes, there's a bit of a range of ability and experience in there, but I think everyone should have a little group of drivers that are of a similar pace to them. Certainly looking at the qualifying times, that seems to be the case. So I don't think anyone's going to have a boring 30 minutes of racing, are they?
You can absolutely guarantee that. That's one of the fantastic things about SimGrid, not just on the Thursday night events, but through the different championships as well, usually with multiple splits, meaning that drivers of all abilities able to get in the action and feel at home, because that's what's more important. It's one thing having multiple splits, but having a split that makes you feel comfortable and makes you feel welcome and not intimidated is one of the brilliant things here at the SimGrid. It's going to be a baptism of fire, there's no doubt about it, for some of the drivers from P25 upwards. But when you look at Lozanov, Novikov and Rupert, that top three separated by, just about 0.2 of a second, 0.3 of a second, then you're about half a second backwards to everyone else. That all becomes irrelevant down into that turn one, because all it takes is one of these drivers in the top 20 just to lock the brakes, a little bit of nerves, and some bad things can happen. But we are in for a huge race tonight.
I think so. This battle between Lozanov and Novikov in particular looks like being rather tasty, doesn't it? I mean, when you're so evenly matched in a qualifying session, it just gets the blood pumping, doesn't it? Because Lozanov will know that he can't rest on his laurels. He wasn't dominant in that qualifying session by any means. He knows that Novikov will have the pace to stick with him. And of course, for Novikov, he'll be a little bit frustrated. He'll be looking back now on that fastest lap, or his personal best lap that he did in that session, and he'll be thinking, right, where did I drop 75 one-thousandths of a second, a quarter of a tenth of a second? He'll be thinking to every braking point, every missed apex, and that will frustrate him, no doubt, and he'll be really keen to try and get that lead back going into the first corner. The drivers will have a green flag lap before we get racing to generate a bit more heat in the tyres. There's a great aerial view of the Kyalami circuit. You can see the way that it twists and turns through the South African countryside, basically part of the town as well. You can see how close some of the residential areas are. A really brilliant place to go racing. A criminally underrated circuit, I think, David. You touched upon this earlier on, how it kind of had its heyday a few decades ago, but it is nice to see, actually, isn't it, that through now the involvement in particular of SRO and bringing their big endurance race there annually, it is starting to gain a bit more recognition now, and quite rightly so, because it is still a fantastic racetrack.
It certainly is, and it's steeped in tradition as well, of course. You know, the F1 having visited there back in its heyday, and a weird fact is that my partner actually used to live across the back from Kyalami, and her parents used to complain constantly about the noise droning from the circuit, and I'm like, how could you? It's just to think of being that close to such an iconic track is almost a privilege nowadays. I can imagine people paying top dollar, and it's fantastic, as you said, criminally underrated circuit, and it's great to see it being returned to maybe even more than the iconic pinnacle of back in the 70s and 80s.
One of the big advantages of sim racing is that you don't have to worry about waking the locals up when you decide to hold a one-make Lamborghini Super Trofeo race at 5 in the morning, and that is certainly one of the freedoms that racing here on the SimGrid affords us. Right, green flag lap well underway. Drivers weaving around, trying to get some heat into those tyres. As we can see, the track temperature has gone up notionally from qualifying up to 16 degrees now. The track condition, though, is apparently now optimum, so this is it. This is as good as it will get. From here on in, the track conditions might start to deteriorate, ironically, as the ambient temperature goes up. Over a 30-minute race, they might just have to start thinking about tyre management to some extent anyway. This place will punish those rear tyres. You've got a lot of tight corners, a lot of acceleration zones, a lot of traction zones where you're spinning those rear wheels, especially easy to do in one of these Lamborghini Super Trofeo cars. So if you really go hell for leather in the early stages, it will be quite easy to overheat those rear tyres, and although it can benefit you in the early stages, might come back to bite you a little bit later on. On board then with Felix Rupert here, third on the grid, staring at the beautiful rear end of the pole sitters Lamborghini, that being Christie and Lozanov. Then he will have the left-hand side of the road. That's the inside for the first proper corner up at Crowthorne. He'll have Alexander Novikov, though, to his outside. 2x2 rolling start, of course, so they're likely to arrive at that first corner absolutely wheel to wheel as well. Through the final corner then, Lozanov can't accelerate too early. You're not allowed to go before the red lights go out and turn to green, which is about to happen. Round number 1 of the Kyalami Mini Series, the Lamborghini Super Trofeo element of the competition, about to get underway. 30 minutes of racing around the Kyalami circuit gets underway. Now the red lights go to green, we are away and racing. Christian Lozanov from pole position then holds that inside line, tries to retain the lead on the run towards turn number 1. Watch out for the second row drivers as well. Felix Rupert goes up the middle of the front row, and there's a bit of a hip and shoulder given there to Novikov on the outside line. That won't go down terribly well. Watching for the midfield and tail end runners. Hopefully they all get through this narrow technical first section of corners without too much contact. So far so good. It's Lozanov with the lead then as they head up towards the top end of the circuit down through Sunset, but it was a very feisty run through the first couple of corners. And there you can see Errol Verby going through as well. He has had a decent start. He's held position more or less. A clean start, though, generally there, David. A little bit of contact at the front of the field, ironically, where we maybe didn't expect it, but all of those starting deep in the field really were behaving themselves.
I'm a little bit disappointed, if I'm honest. Brilliant start, though. Great to see the quality of racing going on just now in this first lap. It's usually a frantic affair, especially in these Super Trofeos. I mean, that's what we have to remind ourselves is just how unruly these machines are. And yeah, I've got to be honest, this is giving the real-life counterpart a run for its money. Excellent racing throughout the field. You've got moves going on left, right, and centre, a little bit of contact, a little bit of nudging. Oh, and that is side-by-side stuff from Novikov on Verwey, and Verwey trying to get better of it, but Novikov's going to outbreak him, try and get the inside line, and these two are just going to fall further and further back. And look at Patrick Nage in the background as well, and Verwey gets absolutely mugged for that third place there, and Novikov takes the position, gets going, but Nage under attack now from Mitchell as well.
Yeah, Mitchell looking to try and take advantage of that, as there was a bit of a stack-up effect ahead of them. I'll tell you what, I'd said that Novikov wouldn't have appreciated that hip and shoulder that he had from Felix Rupert into the first quarter. I think we're seeing that fairly graphically demonstrated now as he himself gets his elbows out and moves back into third position. So it's Lozanov that leads the opening lap, then Rupert second. Novikov is a further 1.3 seconds back now in third position, ahead of Errol Verby in fourth. Fifth position then for the 69 of Mitchell. Patrick Nage down to sixth, losing a place from where he started. And then Rob Taplin, who has in fact moved ahead of him now into sixth place as well. So this is not going to plan, is it, for Patrick Nage, who was one of the drivers that I certainly expected to be up there contending for victory.
Yeah, I've got to be honest, I think Patrick Nage will be in contention, but he needs to clear this gap right now. He needs to get ahead of Rob Taplin and get himself back up to that lead group, because that's now, 3 seconds that they've already opened up, and the more that he's behind there, the more time that he's going to lose out. But I'm going to be honest with you, I don't know if he's got the pace. Look at Taplin just now. He's actually gapping Patrick Nage, and there's a train behind Patrick. So the question is it being held up by Rob, or is it being held up by Patrick? That's what we'll find out in the next couple of minutes.
Yeah, Nage certainly going backwards here. Maybe didn't get enough heat into the tyres on the green flag lap. He's lost 2 positions from where he started, remember. Back in the midfield, just outside the top 10 here, we've got a nice battle going on for 11th position. It is the number 10 car of Dave Juni who's trying to defend the position, but he might actually gain one here, because ahead of him, that's Carlo Barberi making a mistake. He ran wide into the first crocodile, but the wasn't any room through on the way up into Cheetah. They've just been kicked up by one of the cars ahead. There might be a dive up the inside for Barberi. That didn't quite work out in the end either, but Carlo Barberi is right in the thick of the action here as he comes out of the final corner. The three of them are going to be absolutely together now as they drag across the start-finish line through the kink and up into the braking zone at Crowthorne. The group ahead as well getting pretty feisty. To the outside goes Barberi as he tries to go around the outside here then of David Jr. There's no room through on the outside at turn 1 and they settle back in line, but we're starting to see here, aren't we, just how close the racing is going to be when the cars are identical. It's all down to the drivers to try and find that little advantage they need to move their way through the order.
I've got to be honest, I'm absolutely speechless at this. Lap 3 and we've had an amazingly clean start to this race. It could all go to hell in handbasket in the next 5 laps or so, but we've got this 3 laps here where it's just been intense, door-to-door action. And Philip Babalal there for Golden Sheep Motorsports just demonstrating exactly what I was saying before this race started. These STs will just punish you so brutally if you think about firing on that accelerator just a little millisecond too early, or if you get a little bit too greedy with the brake line. You've got to be so smooth, so patient and so gentle with these cars, especially in these cool conditions here at Kyalami. They will punish you greatly, and that's what's going to cause issues with the tyres.
Yeah, and this is also a very bumpy circuit, and these being mid-engine, that is not good. Mid-engine cars are notoriously susceptible to bumpy circuits, unsettling them, making them quite twitchy, and that's certainly a problem the drivers will be facing right now. Lead gap is sort of hovering around 6 or 7 tenths between Lozanov and Rupert, but they are continuing to gap Novikov in third. Novikov is busy watching his mirrors, really, because Errol Verwey is right behind him. So too is Regan Mitchell in the 69, and it's Mitchell that might try and make a move into Crowthorne, thinks about it once, twice, eventually bails out. Errol Verwey hangs on. We already, though, have our first penalty. What was that you were saying, David, about really clean start? We did have an incident on lap 1. Cars 67 and 4. 67, not too sure. That wasn't on our entry list, but number 4.
It's Chris Humphries.
Mills. Sorry, go on, David.
Yeah, I was just sorry. 67 is Chris Humphries and the number 4 is Gareth Mills. That was on a lap 1 incident there. I also just noticed that the 38 of Just Loon had a bit of a moment there on the exit of, I think that was Crocodiles, that he had a moment, but gets going again.
Right, okay, yeah, there's been a spin at the final corner, we believe, so, yeah, there we go. Anyway, it was almost too good to be true, wasn't it, that really clean start that we had? There was bound to be a little bit of contact deep in the field. Hopefully, though, that is the last of the penalties we see. We are already more than 5 minutes into the race, and things just starting to settle down into a bit of a rhythm now. On this lap, actually, Alexander Novikov is lapping a little bit quicker than the lead too. He's taken a few tenths out of Lozanov and Rupert. That gap was up to nearly 2 seconds at the start of the lap, just creeping back down now to 1.6, and you can see the way that Novikov is just gapping Errol Verwey and Regan Mitchell now. So is this just Novikov taking a bit longer maybe to get those tyres into the ideal operating window? We'll find out in a moment or two whether that gap keeps on coming down. Here though, replay of, quite a bit of contact there. That was the incident that we saw, well, we didn't see on that one, but that is where the penalty came then. And quite easy to see why, really. Fairly cut and dry, that one. So, lead gap then, up to 9 tenths of a second that time between Lozanov and Rupert. Novikov is now the fastest man on the track then. He is now only 1.5 seconds back. Another replay now. This was the moment coming out of the final corner there for the number 38 car. We saw a few drivers do that in qualifying, didn't we? And then almost gets collected by the recovering Gareth Mills, having been accosted on the opening lap. So, blind corner that at Ingwe. It is easy, if you've spun, to then get collected by another car coming through. So a couple of drivers struggling here in the early stages, possibly on cold tyres as we mentioned. This low track temperature starting early in the morning here at the Kyalami circuit, but it's producing some really, really good racing at the moment. This is the battle for third. Alexander Novikov at the head of it. We cut back then to the fight for, 13th, 14th and 15th, on board with Harry Phillips now in the number 26 car as we drop down through the S's and through the left, through the right, tries to get a run. You can sometimes overtake up into this next braking zone up at turn number 10. That's Rachmanov in front of him that he's trying to find a way past, but he's not quite as late on the brakes. And so in the end, and then has a big moment on the throttle application on the exit as well. so stays in 14th for now.
That's the problem with this car, and again I say a problem, but it's one of the quirks of this car. You know, you can do all that great work catching up to the back of Rachinov, and then just being a little bit too aggressive on the throttle on the exit there, you undo it all, and suddenly you're going backwards, and that's the number 12 of Wilkes, of Simon Wilkes, who is all over him like a rash, but again gets a good run out that final corner. And what a move there from Harry Phillips. He's going to almost have the move done on Rachinov, who gets a little bit wide out that final corner there, and definitely didn't see that one coming.
Yeah, Phillips has the inside line now into turn number 1, but now it's a battle on the brakes, and Rachinov is just late enough. And in fact, Phillips was maybe a bit circumspect there, because Simon Wilkes almost ran into the back of him, almost had to go to the outside there to avoid running into him. So again, you've got to be on your toes here when you're following a battle like this, as Wilkes is. You want to try and take advantage of it, but if their momentum is suddenly delayed because they're running side by side, for example, then it's quite easy sometimes to end up getting a bit too involved in their fight and not benefiting from it at all. Back at the head of the field, look at how much smaller this gap is now, David. Looks like Felix Rupert is really warming to the task. We're nearly a third of the way through the race, and this gap now is as small as it's ever been.
That's obviously been a mistake from Christian Lozerov there, because that gap was 0.8 of a second. It then came back down to 0.3 of a second, and Rupert, he was on par with the pace of Lozerov, so something has happened on that lap there, and Lozerov now set in purple sector 2 as well, so very, very unusual to see what on earth has happened there, but they're going to make their way down towards the Crocodile and then the final corner here. This is back with Harry Phillips, though, still trying to get past Rachinov there, goes very, very deep into the corner. That allows Wilkes to catch back up, and they're side by side now on the run down to this final corner, and Harry Phillips, what? That is out of absolutely nowhere, gets the move done and makes it look so easy in the process.
Yeah, Rachinov's looked a bit wild on the brakes, hasn't he? And then gets a bit wild on the throttle as well. Has a big moment out of the final corner, and that's going to lose him a second position. So some changing around there. Then Harry Phillips goes 13th, Simon Wilkes goes 14th, and down to 15th place then for Ventsislav Rachinov, who unfortunately lost those 2 places through just a couple of little mistakes. But he's been outbraking himself a little bit anyway over the last lap or so. We've seen that battle developing, and the way that Phillips was applying the pressure, forcing a few mistakes out of Rachinov ahead of him. Eventually that pressure told. So back to the 4th place battle now then. Wherever you look, there are good dices going on. Regan Mitchell here in 5th position. He's been staring at the back of that black number 85 car of Errol Verby since the very start of the race, unable to find a way through. Mitchell's gained 1 position, of course, at the expense of Patrick Nage, who never really has been able to recover from that. Nage is still tucked up behind the 2-on-4 of Rob Tamplin. You can see those two just at the back of that shot, and neither of them really making a huge amount of progress. But Mitchell was one of those drivers that got past Nage at the start. But now things are settling down. Well, I was going to say it's harder to overtake, but if Errol Verby keeps driving on the grass, that might make Regan Mitchell's job a bit easier.
It certainly might. Just going back to that issue between Christian Lozerov and Felix Rupert there, just confirmation, it was an issue in Sector 1 that Christian Lozerov lost half a second on that first sector, then start to pull things back again. But you'll see now that gap was 0.8 of a it was 0.3 of a second, now back up to 0.8 of a second. So Lozerov, as quickly as he's lost that time, has absolutely pulled the gap out of nowhere. The pace that he's got right now is just scandalous.
Patrick Nage, though, unfortunately continues to struggle. I saw him make a big mistake there in the background, just going out through Cheetah, and ran a bit too wide, and there's a big mistake there for Errol Verby. Loses the rear of the car through the first corner and somehow hangs on to the place, but that was a golden opportunity there for Regan Mitchell to move through. Right, side by side battling Egon further back. Ian Harvey is now into 14th because Rachinov continues to fall down the order. In fact, he's lost another one now, hasn't he, I think, to Dominic Fekete. So a couple of spots being lost here for Rachinov, whose car, David, just doesn't look very happy, does it? He's had a few moments now, outbraking himself, getting on the throttle too early, and the trouble is, it's a vicious circle, isn't it? You start doing that because you're starting to overheat the tyres, but then the more you overheat the tyres, the more of those kind of mistakes you're likely to make.
It is a very vicious circle. The only comparable experience I can relate to it is like one of the TCR cars, in terms of just like that, just like you see the number 85 at Earl Verway going wide into that corner. The more you work and hustle these cars, the more they're going to get upset and angry with you. You have to be smooth, you have to be calm, and you have to be controlled. But conversely, I mean, the number 69 of Regan Mitchell is just as likely to be overworking the car right now, trying to get past Errol Verway. So the two of them could be about to lose some big time here. But out to the outside of the final corner here, it's going to be Mitchell on the inside. But Errol Verway really does have a tiny bit of an upper hand here, because Errol is one of Coach Dave Academy's proteges here. Got a lot of coaching from the Coach Dave Academy team, and it really is a great work that David himself has done. David Perel, legendary GT3 driver, has done with Errol, and really we've seen him coming on in leaps and bounds through the different championships. And if you want to get that upper hand yourself, you can head over to coachdaveacademy.com and get yourself to some one-to-one tuition. But Taplin is all over the back of Mitchell right now, Andy, and this could end in tears.
This is brilliant racing though, isn't it? We're on board there with Regan Mitchell, and look who's back at the party now. Patrick Nage rubbing his hands with glee here, because all of this battling going on ahead of him means that number 42 car is starting to become a factor once again. The race win might not realistically be on the cards now, but a top 5 most certainly is, because Errol Verway in 4th is starting to back Regan Mitchell up into Rob Taplin, who in turn is being delayed, allowing Patrick Nage to close in. You've even got the 417 actually of Gerhard Walzer, the green car you can see in the background, who's just inching back towards them. Yeah, I agree with you. This is one of those pressure cooker battles, isn't it? It's got trouble written all over it, because as the car at the head of the queue, Errol Verway has to start getting more and more defensive. Then so everyone behind him starts getting more and more frustrated. They start being closer to each other as well. Guaranteed action, in other words, and we still have just under half the race to go. Just over 14 and a quarter minutes left on the clock. We ride on the roof of the SimSport Racing Lamborghini of Regan Mitchell, looking out of the final corner, back at Rob Tamplin behind. We're getting away from Rob Tamplin because we had a good exit there from the final corner. But how close are we to Errol Verway? I don't think we're all that close going into the first corner, so actually this little battle just settles down for the time being. So we move past half race distance, then just under 1 second now is the cushion for Christian Lozanov at the head of the field. Felix Repair in second, they're nearly 3 seconds ahead of Alex Novikov in third, and then the battle for fourth that we're watching here with Errol Verway somehow just hanging on.
Yeah, cracking battle all the way through the fields here, and we can see Landreth having a huge moment as Seder was caught up in the crash at the final corner. Fadi Seder from Team Gravel Trap there, back to the lead group here. But goodness me, this is just absolute end-to-end stuff here, as Seder is... Look, I'll be honest with you, the police would have him booked for assault after that one, because Barbary is just... He's treating that ST like an absolute weapon right now. Throws it up the inside, does Seder, but Barbary just absolutely giving nothing right now in the morning Kyalami sunshine.
Yeah, Carlo Barberi started up in 10th place, didn't he? Oh dear, and there's more contact, and that has done for Fadi Seder, I think. Well, he's going to carry on, but there'll be even more damage done to what I suspect was already a wounded Lamborghini Huracan, and now he's having more trouble trying to get back on the track. This is the red mist descending, isn't it? You've had a couple of moments, you've just been involved in another impact, you're pointing the wrong way. All you want to do is mash your right foot on the throttle, spin the thing round and carry on, but you can't do that in these cars, because as we've documented quite a lot in this race, the rear end is rather lively under heavy throttle application, and I think that he discovered that there, didn't he, as he tried to rejoin. Right, back to the battling towards the front of the field then. Regan Mitchell is still frustratedly sat in 5th position. Now, David, if this was a sort of 10-week multi-race championship, I'd be saying, do you know what, Regan, just bag the points for 5th, it's a good start to the season, but there are only 5 opportunities to score in this mini-series. You have to capitalise on every chance you have to gain a few extra points.
You absolutely do have to, and the undisciplined would be a little bit different, as we see Fadi Seder on that final corner there, just locking up the brakes. The car over-rotates and he gets hit from left to right, and I've got to be honest, I feel so bad for Fadi Seder. I've been in similar positions myself, and I can imagine that air in that car is Italian blue by this point in the race there. But Regan Mitchell all over the back of Errol Verwey. The answer to your question, no, it's not worth it. It's still 5 races, yes, and the temptation is there to just send it at every possible opportunity. But with these new, stricter guidelines from race control here at the SimGrid, it's not worth it. Any contact, any collision gets massively punished, and the risk-reward ratio, Andy, just is not there.
I agree with you. I'm not convinced Regan does, because he's still really harrying Errol Verwey here, who is defending remarkably well, actually. I was going to mention this a couple of laps ago. After he made a little mistake, it would have been easy for him to get a bit flustered and start over-defending, but that's not what he's doing. You see, he moves there to the middle of the road. Oh, but there's a gap up the inside for Regan Mitchell. You can see him there darting around in the mirrors. That so nearly ended in contact, and thankfully Regan, I think on that occasion, did decide that discretion was the better part of valour. He backed out of the move. There was a gap, but it was always going to close, and he was always going to struggle to get the car slowed down on that tight line. So Regan Mitchell ironically ends up losing ground as a result of bailing from that move. Behind him, Rob Taplin and Patrick Nage are getting themselves involved in an ever more entertaining battle as well, because Patrick Nage, having caught this group, hasn't yet made any progress through it, and this being just a 30-minute sprint race, he's going to have to get on with it, because we are now into those final 10 minutes.
Yeah, it's make or break now time. With those final 10 minutes, you're maybe going to get 1 or 2 positions at the most. It's really all been about those opening 5-10 minutes, getting yourself into the position for these final chapters of the race here. This is down in 10th place. Dave Jr. late on the brakes, and again you can see just how violently that Lamborghini ST it pitches under braking. The load goes to the front of the car, the suspension really struggles to deal with it, and the car often, when you're turning, over rotates, and that's where the back end washes out, and that's where the time is lost and won really in this track, because it's so bumpy. It is a perfect match for these ST cars, and a wild fun, and I can guarantee you every single one of these drivers tonight, Andy, is going to be leaving this first race with a huge grin on their face.
Apply that to the commentators as well, because I've really enjoyed this race. This has been proper stuff, and it ain't over yet. Dave Jr. sees a chance here to move 1 more place upside the top 10. He's in the top 10 now, but he dives, does he, to the inside of Aaron Trout. There's no room at Crowthorne, but he's forced the 999 car to brake quite a bit too late there. And in the end, that did the job. That was brilliant offensive driving there, wasn't it, from Dave? Because he made Aaron Trout think that he was going to dive up the inside from a long way back, which probably he was never really intending to do. But that little flash to the inside, that flash of colour in the wing mirrors, was enough to distract Aaron Trout. Missed his braking point, off wide he went, and in the end, a very easy overtake for Dave Jr., who is likely now not to get any further up the order, because he's 2.5 seconds behind this group of cars, who are still somehow in the same order. Errol Verwey 4th, Regan Mitchell 5th, Rob Taplin 6th, Patrick Nage 7th, then it is Volzer in 8th position, who is with them now, isn't he, just about? As close as this group has been, David, they just seem so evenly matched. No way through. It's going to take a mistake, perhaps like that one there for Regan Mitchell, to see any of these positions swap.
And that's exactly it. We saw that from Aaron Trout and Junior there. It's the mind games. It's the jinking to the left, making your opponent double guess exactly what you're going to be doing here. And what you do has an effect on the driver in front. So you can see Mitchell here has Taplin all in his mirrors, but he's trying to concentrate on Verwey. Verwey's the slower car here, and if they can knuckle down, they can both get past Verwey, but not like this, as Taplin drifts a little bit wide out that last corner there. And I would put a small amount of money on Aaron Trout, that 999 car, that he is going to lose that place to Babulal if he doesn't keep his head down and keep things going, because what you can normally find, in fact that's not going to happen, because Babulal actually drifting further away. When you lose a position like that, as he did to Junior, you're so enraged, you're so concentrated on trying to get that position back after that mistake that you can overdrive the car, and that, as you pointed out earlier, leads to more mistakes, that vicious cycle of the car overworking itself, and the tyres just run away very, very quickly, and before you know it, you've gone from the top 10 to the top 30.
Yes, and I think we almost saw a bit of that earlier on from Venceslav Rachinov as well, didn't we, who has continued to slip down the order now because he's dropped behind the Josh Inman number 110 car now into 16th place, and Rachinov was up there troubling the top 10 in the early laps of the race. 6 minutes still to go then. The lead gap, we haven't seen much of the leaders in this race because this scrap for the lower places within the top 10 has been just so enthralling, but Christian Lozanov has never had more than a sort of 8 or 9 tenths of a second cushion over Felix Rupert, but so far that has been enough because Rupert just cannot get any closer in order to have a go. He got within a few tenths, didn't he, after Lozanov made that mistake earlier on, but Christian was then able to extend the margin out again. Alexander Novikov, meanwhile, the loneliest driver in the race, 2 seconds behind those two, but 6.5 seconds ahead of this scrap for 4th place. This really is, without doubt, where all of the action has been within the top 10. Right on board with Errol Verwey, who has defended supremely well for the first 25 minutes of this race. He just needs to hang on for another few laps, and of course by this point now, David, he's kind of sussed out where Regan Mitchell has maybe a little bit of an advantage over him, therefore he knows where to defend, he knows where maybe he can afford to relax a little bit, and that means that for Regan Mitchell, the job of getting past Errol gets harder and harder with every lap because Errol continues to learn.
Verwey's in a very strong position because not only does he have the benefit of knowing what Regan Mitchell is up to, as you just pointed out, but he's also got Rob Taplin behind Regan applying pressure there. You did have Patrick Nash there for a while, but I think they're kind of dropping off a little bit, but they're also going to have a back marker that they're going to have to get their way around very shortly as well. I think that's actually the number 67 that they're coming up to very, very shortly. But again, Errol Verwey doing really, really well to hold on to this battle, but it does work sometimes the other way as well because it gives Regan Mitchell the information on where he's going to be going as well. And Babulal, who I thought was maybe going to catch up to Ehrentraut, now under increasing pressure from Harry Phillips. Can Harry Phillips take that 11th place away with just 4 minutes left to go?
Oh, well, he probably will if Babulal keeps on making mistakes like that. He outbrakes himself up into turn number 10, and as they drop down to the mine shaft then, Harry Phillips is up the inside. This would be the 2nd place that Harry has gained in this race because he started 13th and he does now go into 11th place. He's 2.5 seconds though behind the Dave Jr. and Ehrentraut battle, so I'm not sure he's going to get there in the final couple of laps. Errol Verwey diving up the inside of a back marker there into the final corner. That was a bit dicey on the exit because he hadn't quite cleared the slower car, but in the end they do just about avoid trading paint. Errol Verwey then with this very narrow advantage over Regan Mitchell, who now too dives up the inside of the slower runner. Running out of time now, only time for a couple more laps here around the Kyalami circuit. The tyres are at their worst now, the brakes are very hot. The drivers are probably a bit frustrated, especially those like Regan Mitchell, who has been staring down the barrel of this 4th place for most of the race, but just hasn't ever quite been able to get within proper striking range. Bit of a mistake there for Verwey, though, as they came out of turn number 5 at Barbecue, and now another back marker ahead. I don't know, David, this one isn't over. All it takes here is for Verwey to get delayed by this back marker, which looks like it might happen. Oh, and it is happening, and all of a sudden Regan Mitchell is right back on his tail.
Yep, game on, here we go. This is exactly what we love to see, just shenanigans abound. And the thing is like the lap car hasn't really done anything wrong. It's got a blue flag. He's not like blocked the position, but he's just taking his racing line. It's up to the faster car to safely to make its way around. So I think that some frustration will be vented by Errol Verwey for sure, but he's held up with the stress and the pressure for this way. I can't see what Regan Mitchell has got to do now with 2:15 left to go, other than a last lap lunge. I think Verwey might have this sorted.
Yeah, because every time Verwey defends, you would expect him to lose a bit of speed on the exit of the corner. That doesn't seem to be happening, so he's looked after his rear tyres pretty well, and he's still coming off these tight corners really strongly, despite going in on the tight defensive line. just to prove the point we made at the start of the race, that there would be battling wherever you looked in this race, this is for 23rd place, and you'd think it was for the race win, wouldn't you? Because Mike Landreth is really having to make his Lamborghini Huracan the widest Lamborghini Huracan to try and hang on to that 23rd position. That's Ticehurst right behind him, and then the 89 machine right behind as well of Greg Van Nierkerk, who was involved in some contact earlier on, I seem to recall. More back markers in the way for Errol Verby, who has already been made to work very, very hard for this position. He's going to have to continue to work hard for 4th place for the remaining lap or so. They head down towards Sunset once again, as once again the battle a little bit further down the order continues to close up. Errol Verby will be thinking, where on earth is this checkered flag? Surely it's been 30 minutes now. Well, I'm sorry, Errol, but you might just have to keep defending for a little while longer.
Oh, this doesn't bode well, does it? Because Errol's really under a lot of pressure, but it's going to be the last lap's going to get started very shortly for Lozanov. In fact, we'll have to check on the checkered flag. They'll be very, very close as we see Scott Ticehurst up the inside there, fighting side by side. And there's contact as the number 19 of Landreth, who gets spun, unceremoniously dumped around the corner. And I've got a feeling that's going to be a post-race penalty for sure on that one.
I knew it was naive of me to suggest we'd only get one penalty from this race. Regan Mitchell super late on the brakes there into the Crocodiles. We are about to start the final lap of what has been an enthralling opening race of the Kyalami Mini Series. The Lamborghini Super Trofeo cars have put on one heck of a show. Every lap of the race has been led by Christian Lozanov, but that doesn't really do his performance justice, because he's never had, as I said, more than about 9/10 of a second in hand over Felix Repair in second. Those two are going to be very evenly matched, I think, over the remaining 4 races we'll have left after this one. Meanwhile, for 4th position, Errol Verby has it. Regan Mitchell wants it, and Rob Taplin thinks maybe he can steal it on the final lap. He goes around the outside of Regan Mitchell. That gives him the inside line for turn number 3. Bit of wheel banging. They almost come to blows. Just about enough room to get the 2 cars through the corner, but that surely now, David, lets Errol Verby off the hook.
It certainly does, and Patrick Naj now into this battle as well, because Taplin, Mitchell and Naj in a 3-way scrap for 5th place right now. Verby laughing himself silly all the way to the finish line right now. He's off the hook, a second to the clear, and it is now just all about these 3 cars here. What you have to watch though is that Verby doesn't take his eyes off the prize too much, because you can kind of let your foot off the throttle and think, right, I just need to bring it home. But these 3 are still charging, so all it takes is a mistake and they'll be into it. And look at Naj on the back of Taplin. They're almost side by side on the run up to the hairpin here, that left-hander up the inside. They're door banging again. What a race this is.
Yeah, you can tell it's the last lap, can't you? No holds barred stuff now. At the head of the field, it's a little bit calmer though, because Christian Lozanov is coming up to the final corner now, and he is going to be the first winner in the Kyalami Mini Series. He will win race number 1 here in the Lamborghini Super Trofeo cars. Not by a huge margin, but he led every lap of the way from pole position. Christian Lozanov wins the opening race of the night. Felix Repair comes home in 2nd position, and I tell you what, Alex Novikov really caught them there towards the end. Right, what happens behind them? Deep breath, it will be 4th for Errol Verby, 5th Regan Mitchell, 6th Rob Taplin, 7th Patrick Naj, and Volzer really dropped back actually a bit there at the end, didn't he, in 8th position. In fact, he has disappeared altogether, because Dave Jr. is 8th, Aaron Trout is 9th. What has happened to Volzer?
I think he's got hit on the final corner and he's out of the race. So that's exactly what's happened to Volzer there. Yeah, that has not worked out well for him, and he's massively down the order there.
He is...
we
came through 11th, but yeah, I think there was a bit of a delay in that showing on the timing tower. So Volzer then does come home 11th, but there's a story to tell there. Meanwhile, we're not done with the battles further back. This is that one for 23rd that was entertaining us earlier on. Looks like Scott Ticehurst will just about hang on, but only by the skin of his teeth, because Van Nierkerk was right behind him as they came across the start-finish line. And that, everyone, was part 1 of tonight's entertainment. We still have another race to come in a different kind of car, of course, as we now move over to the GT3 Lamborghini Huracan car, the GT3 Evo. But the Super Trofeos really put on a show there, a fantastic race to watch. In particular, the fight for fourth there, David, but a word on our race winner there, because that was an absolutely wheel-perfect performance under fairly intense pressure. It's easy to think that because they were never quite nose to tail at the front of the field, that was just a cruise to victory, but anything less than a second between you and the car behind you, it catches your attention, and the slightest of mistakes there could have changed everything.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It was a drive that we really expected from Christian Lozanov, and expectation is one thing, but to actually deliver it, yeah, great performance from him, but not to underplay the amazing job that the 71 car of Felix Rupert did in that second place, constantly keeping Lozanov under pressure, keeping him honest, keeping that gap to about a second there, while dealing with the pressure that he had from behind as well. Great run from Rupert. A fantastic race, and I've got to be honest, I think all the drivers are going to be breathing a huge sigh of relief. I myself, I'm so impressed, because the Super Trofeo, we said this at the beginning, Andy, it's a wild car, very difficult to control, and that is one of the cleanest Super Trofeo races I think I've seen.
Yeah, and out of all of the tracks, for it to be at Kyalami is all the more impressive. You know, if you were at Spa or Silverstone or something, a circuit that's a bit more forgiving, you might expect it, but yeah, I'm with you. I expected a few more incidents, not just contact, but just drivers spinning and going off the road all of their own accord, but that didn't really happen, did it? Oh, that was the issue through the final corner for Gerhard Walter. And well, although he was helped off the track, the initial bit of spinning that he was doing there looked as though it was fairly self-inflicted, so what was I just saying about how we didn't actually see that many people spinning off the road, and then Gerhard Walter did it right at the end, and he wasn't really under much pressure there, was he, David? So I think that might have been a little bit of that concentration maybe being lost as he got towards the very end of the race. Right, we will move on to our next race momentarily, but first, let's have a word with our first winner in the Kyalami Mini Series. Christian Lozanov has joined us here in the commentary box. Christian, huge congratulations. That looked like a pretty easy race, but you never really had much of a gap there, did you?
Yes, I didn't have much of a gap. It was a very close race. I had some mistakes. The car was very nervous, but I managed to win, so I'm very happy.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about the car and what it's like to drive, because all of the drivers that we've spoken to, and I know that I've driven the car as well, it's very twitchy, it's very difficult to control. Is it a car that you enjoy driving?
Yes, it's very enjoyable, but in the race it was very nervous, especially under the brakes, so it was a very hard race. But yes, it's very enjoyable.
How much do you enjoy the GT3 version then? What are your hopes now for race number 2? Another win, I guess.
Of course, I want to win again, but we'll see how it will go.
Excellent stuff. Well, Christian, thank you for joining us. Congratulations on the first race victory. The early championship lead goes to Christian Lozanov. Best of luck for race number 2.
Thank you.
So that is our first race in the books then, David Christie. What a race that was. How much can we read into the rest of the season though? Because it's not like your traditional championships where we'd now go into another race in the same cars and with the same drivers, because we now have to completely change everything. We've got a brand new qualifying session because they're all in completely different cars now. Yes, they're still Lamborghini Huracans, but the GT3 Evo, it is not guaranteed, is it, that the drivers who went strongly in the first race will be the same ones that are at the very front in this one?
The GT3 Evo is a very refined affair compared to the Super Trofeo. I think it leads a very, very good precedent for what we can expect to the second race, and I'm a little bit curious to see how Felix Rupert is going to deal with this one. I think he might be able to have the upper hand over your race winner Christian Lozanov on this one, but I don't think it's going to be as wild in terms of the drivers handling the cars. However, I think we're going to see a lot more contact, a lot more door-to-door contact with the drivers, because that whole thing, Andy, of familiarity breeds contempt. I think the drivers are going to get a little bit more leery with these cars and be able to throw it about, knowing that they can have a little bit more confidence. They've got some of them, the driver aids at their disposal, unlike the ST. So don't be surprised to see some of those previous top 5 up in the top 5 again, but qualifying is completely separate for this one. So again, we could see some big surprises with drivers able to put themselves up at the top.
Yes, because of course if you give a driver a car that they are more comfortable with and that they aren't spending half of the time fighting for control of, they're more likely to get stuck into the racing, I suppose. So what we're saying, everybody, is it's worth sticking around for this second race, which will be coming up very shortly. The driver's just jumping across into the other server. They get a very quick practice session just to give them time to get there. Then it will be another 15-minute qualifying session and another 30-minute race. Who were some of the other drivers there then, David, that sort of jumped out to you in that race? I mean, Errol Verby, we spoke an awful lot about his defensive driving in that first race. I can't really say enough about it, because the way in which he was able to fend off what I think was a slightly quicker group of cars, honestly, I think Regan Mitchell, if he'd got through into 4th place, might have been able to pull away, but Errol knew exactly where to place that car to hang on to the position, and that was really, really impressive.
It certainly was. The 26th of Harry Phillips stood out to me. He had a really, really decent race, was able to make up a couple of positions, got caught up in some of the battles, especially with Simon Wilkes and Greg Van Nierk as well. But, I mean, he really, really kind of stood out to me. It's a difficult one, because one of the points you made out as well, Andy, in the previous race, and right at the beginning actually, was the fact that it almost doesn't matter where you are on the grid. You're always going to be in that battle, but that has its own downsides as well. If you want to challenge for the top 5, you have to be in the top 10 realistically in qualifying. Otherwise, you're leaving yourself in a lot of danger.
Yeah, because overtaking is not going to be any easier, really, in these GT3 cars. If anything, because they are a little bit better on the brakes, the braking distances are shorter. That means that outbraking your opponents is that little bit more difficult. And so, moving through the pack in the GT3 cars, ironically, might actually be harder. Even though the cars are easier to drive, that sometimes makes it a bit more difficult to move your way through. The other thing that I touched upon at the top of the show was that with this now being a completely separate race, basically, with a whole new qualifying session to set the grid, which, by the way, is only about 20 seconds away from starting that qualifying session for our second race of the night. But because you have this second bite of the cherry now, a second chance to go out and qualify, get yourself a good grid position, it does present an opportunity, doesn't it, for those that had a difficult first race. Carlo Barberi is one that really springs to mind, who was in and around the top 10 before he had that early drama. Ordinarily, he might be thinking, oh, well, that's it now, I'm going to be at the back of the grid for race 2 as well, that's my night ruined. Not so, he's got another chance now to make amends.
He certainly does, and again, with it being a championship, you have to have that long game mentality, Andy. It has to be about what points you can take away from the evening. Fair enough, if you've had a bad race one, that's fine. Dust yourself off, you can still make huge inroads. There's 4 races to go, and really, really get your foot in the door in terms of the championship. So, I mean, we're only about, 5 minutes away now from getting our next qualifying session on the go. In fact, we're already green in quali, such as how time has flown tonight. It's a case of, your mental resilience. It's a case of dust yourself down, get yourself back on with it, and it's that old cliche of getting back on the horse, but that's really all you can do here at Kyalami tonight.
Yes, indeed, and that's exactly what the drivers are doing. Very similar looking cars, but these are the Lamborghini Huracan GT3 Evos. They're that little bit quicker, that little bit easier to drive. But is it going to be the same drivers that we see at the front of the field? Ventsislav Rachinov here, who had a couple of dramas in our Super Trofeo race just now, will be looking to try and maybe improve on his 14th place on the grid that he scored in the Super Trofeos earlier on. had that really close qualifying session at the start of the night, didn't we, between Christian Lozanov and Alexander Novikov, and that did make the difference ultimately, didn't it? Because Lozanov went on to lead every lap and win. Novikov ended up getting pushed wide at the first corner, dropped initially to 4th, and only ever recovered to 3rd. So even that difference between starting 1st and 2nd on the grid can completely dictate the way that the rest of your evening goes. So this is going to be another really hotly fought qualifying session. Again, it is only 15 minutes, so they've got to get a move on here, getting heat into the tyres. That might be a little bit easier now though, David, because the track temperature is just creeping back up again. The trouble in a way that they've got now is this low sun, which I'd imagine at certain angles might be shining into the driver's eyes, and just as we'd see in the real world, it's the same here in the sim. That can be a distraction.
It certainly can, and the sun might have got into the eyes of Josh Inman because he's binned it at sunset, gets the car going again, but that 110, that is not the way you want to start your qualifying session, with bringing out a yellow flag and a considerable time to get that car back out on track. But again, it's just a case of keeping things steady, keeping things going. A little bit later on, the track temperature now up to 17 degrees Celsius. That is positively summer temperatures here in Scotland, and that is 6 o'clock in the morning for South Africa. Such is the difference. But again, you'll notice the track is reverted. The track has gone from optimum to fast, so it's cooled down a little bit, and the driver's going to have to get used to these changing conditions and this changing car. But expect to see, I think, from what I'm expecting, to see that spread of times much closer in these GT3 Evos.
I don't know what you're talking about, David. I'd heard that tropical conditions were the norm up at your neck of the woods this time of year. Yes, 17 degrees, nice and toasty now out there for the drivers. They should be able to get the tyres up to temperature just that little bit more rapidly. There's Errol Verwin, the number 85 car again, then 4th place in the earlier race. A good haul of points for him at the start of the season. He'll be looking now to back that up in race number 2. Of course, if you are off to a good start in race 1, maybe even a better one than you were expecting, not saying that's necessarily the case for Errol, but if you are a driver that didn't expect to score quite so heavily in that first race, it sort of adds an extra layer of pressure now onto this next one, because all of a sudden you find yourself thinking rather more about the championship points than you maybe initially would have done. Denise Pope here then in the Wild Things Racing Lamborghini heads up the hill through Barbecue, turns 4 and then into turn 5, and then important to get off that corner well, because it's quite a long drag actually now down to Sunset. Ironically, as the sun rises over the Kyalami circuit, turns into the right-hander. That's a really fun corner, that one, isn't it, actually, David? But a difficult one, because the temptation is to just get on that loud pedal as early as you can through the right-hander at Sunset, but even a fraction too early, and it can send you off the road altogether, or at the very least, on the wrong line then into turn 7.
And that's exactly it. Momentum is such a key factor in this track. It's so important to keep the momentum up, keep the pace up, and not overcook the braking, not overcook the tyres, not overcook anything, to make sure that not just this lap, but your next lap and the lap after that keeps on the pace that it possibly can do. So again, so important. And this is where I said earlier about the frustration coming in with cars going off, because you get distracted, your peripheral vision spots something out of the corner of its eye there, and it makes it very difficult for you to fully commit. Even that puff of dust from the car in front of Denise Pope there, enough to distract and put you off your stride. But interestingly, early on, Alexander Novikov 141.076, 6/10 of a second up to the good here. Is that going to come down? I think absolutely 10 minutes is a long time. We saw the fastest laps coming in with about 4 or 5 minutes left to go. So some different names up at the top 10, but again, expect to see them cycle, as we've barely got half of the field with qualifying times.
Yeah, only the first lap here being completed. It takes quite a long time, really, doesn't it, to get one of these qualifying sessions going. By the time you've done your out lap from the pit lane, which takes a bit of time, and found a bit of clear air, and then got the tyres up to the proper temperature, you can be nearly halfway through the session before you really start hitting your stride. Felix Rupert then coming through. He was 3rd on the grid in the Super Trofeo car, comes out of the final corner, doesn't run too wide over the curb. That was nicely done. And his opening gambit then puts him second this time, so he splits Novikov and actually Errol Verwey, who goes third. Harry Phillips up there in fourth. That's a decent effort, just ahead of Christian Lozanov. And then number 114 goes through David Dancer and goes into sixth. Carlo Barberi, one of the drivers I said will be looking to bounce back in this race. He moves up into fifth position as Lozanov goes back ahead of Rupert into second. So they're starting to warm to the task now. And we are, as you said, seeing a few different names now at the pointy end. Another one here is the 77 car of Alan Hart, the Bohowell Motorsport livery, which works its way up through sunset. One of my personal favourite liveries on these Lamborghini GT3 cars, and running well at the moment. Alan, another one of those drivers in the top 10 now, who was only 20th on the grid actually for the previous race.
And he was in a cracking battle. I think he was fighting 23rd or 22nd position. We saw that on the replay earlier on. And again, we do try and cover as many of the cars as we possibly can, but we do have to try and balance up where all the different fights are going on. So that's the other great thing about the second race and the second car, is that it gives us another opportunity, another chance to see different drivers and different battles going on. But again, are we going to see a repeat of the Mitchell battle that we saw early on, where he was knocking lumps out of Errol Verwey and Patrick Nage, just deciding to stop in the middle of the pit lane and then return to garage there? That's a little bit frustrating. Barbary is a man to watch just now. Carlo Barbary. Now, I'm thinking this might be a repeat of some lies that we had last time out, where we were told some split times and they were wildly wrong. So, given the pace that Barbary had in that first race, I'm going to be a little bit sceptical that he was 7/10 up. But I think he might make a small improvement, 1 to 2 tenths. But at the moment, that would put him up into the top 10. But I mean, that lap from Novikov, 1:41.07.6, Andy, still 2 tenths ahead of everyone else, at least, and early benchmark getting put in.
Yeah, absolutely. And he and Lozanov, as they did in the previous session, have both bailed for the pit lane midway through. Now, looked as though Regan Mitchell was about to improve there as he came across the line, but onto the front row. Well, first of all, went Fouquet in the 38, but then Regan Mitchell just narrowly misses out on pole position, just under 1/10 of a second adrift of Alexander Novikov's time, and that means race one winner Christian Lozanov is down into 4th position. So more and more improvements coming in. We've got Chad Smith here in the Happy Wired racing car, who maybe lost a 10th or so out of the final corner, but he should still improve further up inside the top 20. Yes, goes 7th place, just ahead actually of Aaron Trout, who's a bit further down the order than you might expect. Philip Bababal as well, another in the Boots and Gignon liveried Lamborghini, who is a little out of position, you would fancy, although Dave Jr., who's just ahead of him, of course, those two were in an entertaining enough scrap in the earlier race, and he gets very sideways just as we cut across to another very sideways Lamborghini, this time in the hands of David Dancer, up into the final corner then. 11th place for Dancer, just under 3/4 of a second off pole position. Is that too wide? That was very close. It hasn't been invalidated. It's just within track limits, and just as well, because he jumps up into 6th position, does David Dancer. Good effort, that.
I love the livery on that car. Completely biased. Do love a little bit of the yellow and black there, but great to see that. Hang on. I'm sorry, Andy. What? Carlo Barbary, right? I was downplaying. Again, I love that livery. Downplaying his timings there. Carlo Barbary goes pole position for Ada Pro Esport with a 1:40.989. That track is evolving so fast. And we are getting some, names up there that we were absolutely non-existent in race one.
And this is exactly what we said. Barbary needed to bounce back after that incident that he had in the earlier race. Lots of points lost. What better way to do it than to stick it on pole position? Simon Wilkes there improves a little bit. Rob Taplin now. Haven't seen the best of him here, I don't think. Remember, he was solidly inside the top 10. He qualified 7th for the earlier race. He's on a better lap time here than 13th place would suggest. Where does he jump up to? 5th. He goes ahead of Christian Lozanov, the race one winner and pole sitter. Led every lap of the earlier race, did Lozanov, and he is now all the way down in 6th position. Patrick Nage, meanwhile, is only 16th right now. Errol Verwey is only 11th. We've got a few drivers that were front runners in the previous race who still need to try and improve. And Patrick Nage in particular here, I think David really needs to try and improve. We saw him bail for the pit lane earlier on. He had that slightly frustrating start to the early race. Errol Verby bails out of this lap, but let's see what Patrick Nage can do. He really needs to improve on 16th.
Yeah, he certainly does, but he's going up about 5 tenths, 6 tenths at the moment, so yeah, that would be enough to put him into the top 5 just now. Carlo Barbary currently on pole position. He has absolutely thrown that car to within an inch of its life. He goes across the line, no improvement there for Carlo Barbary, but here comes Patrick Nage, goes across the line up to 8th position. That was an improvement of about 4 or 5 tenths of a second for Patrick Nage. Gets himself up into contention, and here is Alexander Novikov then again does a little bit of an improvement on his last lap there. Is 1:41.076. So he gets going through to the final couple of corners now. It's the run down to that final corner, Andy, and TN Racing's Alexander Novikov currently 3 tenths of a second up. This could be it. This could be an absolute nuke of a qualifying lap. Comes out that final corner though, and what can Alexander Novikov do? Gets a good run out of there. This is going to be pole position surely, and Novikov goes across the line by 1/10. Oh my god, Rupert goes into second place, Andy.
Wow, Felix Rupert, just as it looked as though Novikov had established himself by just over a tenth at the front of the field, Felix Rupert gets right back on his tail. Rupert, who started third from the previous race, finished second after that very committed first corner that he had. He's back on the front row again. Barbary goes third, then Mitchell fourth. Christian Lozanov's back to fifth now. Didn't see where he got that improvement from, but he has picked up 1 place. Patrick Nage then into ninth. Now, I noticed on the previous lap, Nage had a big moment at this next corner, turn 15, through Cheetah. I think he got a bit too much curb on the way through the corner, got sideways on the exit, and he's done it again. Takes way too much curb, rattles over the gravel on the outside as well. That is the same corner that cost him a few tenths on the previous lap. It lost him more than that this time. The good news is he's got a bit more time to get another couple of laps in, but that corner has been his Achilles heel in this session.
Cars are green every single corner of this track, and what that means is that everyone is improving at an exponential rate right now. Babalao, would you believe it, is actually going for pole right now for Boots and Giron Racing through the final corner then. He's 9 tenths of a second down on pole position. This is how fast the track is evolving right now. Babalao going for pole, only gets 5th place, so Philip Babalao, what a run that was. But again, Andy, look at that, almost 20 cars within a second of each other.
This is super competitive, isn't it? Right, Christian Lozanov, what have you got for us? Race 1 winner, race 1 pole sitter, comes across the start finish line, goes back to pole, and is immediately bettered by Felix Rupert by 6/100ths of a second, because Rupert got a toe from the man that he's just beaten to pole position. That is sneaky stuff from the 71 driver. But hey, if you're going to tag along with anyone, tag along with the guy that you think you'll be fighting for pole position with. That's exactly what Rupert did. That was really savvy stuff. Whether he stays there or not is another matter, because they all have time for one more lap, but that was really clever, that.
Do you remember when Carlo Barbary was on pole position and we were absolutely stunned? That feels like 15 years ago. Errol Verwey though, coming through the final couple of corners, he's 9 tenths down. He's up just now by about a second. Errol Verwey just 1 corner away from taking pole position. That looked like a slower exit, but he goes across the line. What can he do? He's into 3rd place, so it's that last corner that's cost him. Huge drama. Now 3 drivers within 1/10 of a second, and Mitchell is now ahead just now, 2 tenths of a second. Oh my goodness me, Andy, I almost don't know where to look with the last 25 seconds of this qualifying.
Patrick Nage there then up into 4th position, where he was 19th last time I checked. I don't know where they're finding this time from. The track temperature isn't going up at all, it's just rubbering in, I think. There's a car off in the background, that's the Barwell car, I think, that has found the barriers there coming out of Loikop. But we'll not worry about that too much right now, because Regan Mitchell was ahead of that car, therefore he hasn't been faced with any yellow flags. He does have a car ahead of him that's just been off the road, but bails out of the way, gets a wheel on the grass into Crocodile. Nicely held, inch perfect on the exit. Now the way that people are improving right now, don't bet against Regan Mitchell jumping into the top 3 here. He's less than a quarter of a second off the top. Again, he's about as wide as you dare go out of the final corner. It's not invalidated, but it also isn't an improvement, so he stays where he was. The checkered flag is out now. Harry Phillips from 14th is next across the start-finish line. Needs to find just over a quarter of a second. He finds about 3/4 of a second. He finds 1/4 to move into 10th place. What can Patrick Nage do then? He is 3.5 tenths up on his previous best. He only needed just over 2 of those tenths to go to provisional pole position. Lozanov has seen the checkered flag and not improved. Novikov has seen the checkered flag and not improved. But David, what about Patrick Nage? This would be quite the comeback if he could get himself onto that front row.
So close. Look at just how much he's hustling that car, and you can get away with that with the Evo GT3 version of this Lamborghini. Nage, though, looking like he could very well do it. He does it right to death. 140.515. Patrick Nage takes pole position right now. And I don't see if anybody else has actually got the lap in it to do it. Gerhard Walzer certainly looking like he could improve, but not on pole position pace right now. And I tell you what, that is a master stroke from Patrick Nage to leave that right at the last gasp. And that's answered our question. It's now turned it on its head, and we've got a completely different top 5 than we did in the first race.
Patrick Nage was 19th and in the gravel about a minute and a half from the end of that session. And he ends it on pole position. That is remarkable. Here then is how they will line up for round number 2 of the Kyalami Mini Series. This time lining up in the Lamborghini Huracan GT3 Evos. It is Patrick Nage out of nowhere who steals pole position. Not by a huge amount though in the end over Felix Rupert, who again is near the front. Qualified 3rd, remember, in the previous race. He's 2nd this time. Christian Lozanov is 3rd on the grid for this race, with Errol Verwey in 4th, exactly the same place that he started race number 1. Alexander Novikov is there in 5th position then. He started, remember, on the front row earlier on, with Regan Mitchell 6th, again the same place he started in the Super Trofeos. Rob Taplin is 7th, with Gerhard Walzer for company on row number 4, ahead of Carlo Barberi, who was on pole position halfway through the session and winds up only just inside the top 10. Harry Phillips will round out that top 10, ahead of Philip Babalol and Josh Inman. Dominic Fouquet and Dave Jr. down in 14th. Thomas Ehrentraut is 15th, ahead of Venceslav Rachinov. Then David Dancer and Alan Hart in 17th and 18th on the 9th row of the grid. And that, David, was only qualifying. I mean, I don't know where we go from here now. We've got a 30-minute race to come, but quite frankly, if it can live up to that qualifying session, that will take some doing.
Oh, that was amazing, and that's exactly what we expected. We said at the beginning that the GT3 Evo, with its refined nature and its mod cons and ability for drivers just to be able to jump into it, is going to be so much easier to do there. So yeah, really, really good to see. Predictable stuff there, and my goodness me, Andy, what a race we are in store for.
Yeah, it's going to be quite good this, isn't it? I think 30 minutes of racing ahead then. Patrick Nage, there you can see, on the pole position then by that very, very small amount. But is he going to be able to get the race victory? He could do with it, really, couldn't he? He'll be a bit disappointed, I think, about the way that his previous race went, really. Started race number 1, did Nage from 5th, but ended up down in 7th, really, within the first couple of corners. So here is a golden opportunity to get some points away from, in particular, Christian Lozanov, who looked as though for a while there, didn't it, like he might have a bit of a disastrous session, but Christian still ended up in 3rd place, really, so that's not a complete disaster, and he'll certainly be looking to try and back up that victory from earlier on with a pole position in race number 2. We walk here virtually, at least down the middle of the grid. Simon Wilkes there, 19th place, 20th place for Ian Harvey. You can see just how far back this grid stretches. Another great chance to point out here, Dave, just how popular this mini-series has been. Great to see so many cars on the grid, and I anticipate that we're going to see even more of the good battling that we had in the early race, but in these slightly more drivable cars, perhaps some of those with a bit less experience might feel that they can get stuck in a bit more.
Yeah, they certainly can, and talking about getting stuck in, if you value your privacy and your security online, then why not check out our brand new partner for this year over at ExpressVPN. That's expressvpn.com/the SimGrid. The link is in the description below. You can get 3 months free on any of their 12-month services, and if you want to look after your security, or even if you want to watch some of the different things that are on around the globe, then check out ExpressVPN at expressvpn.com/the SimGrids. Right, back to the race then, Andy. You were asking about the differences and the ability to reset and get going again for the second race. I come back to something I said earlier. The difference in this car is like night and day compared to the ST. Sure, the ST is a lot of fun, but it's also incredibly frustrating to drive, especially in anger, especially competitively. But these things, I mean, I really like the chances now. You know, you look at Carlo Barberi down in 9th position. Any one of these top 20 could have a chance at having a real good finish tonight, a real strong points finish after this this great qualifying session, given that we had such a close qualifying there. You know, 20 drivers within about 1.1 seconds. It's too close to call right now. Sure, we've got the fast drivers of Naj and Rupert and Lozanov up there and Verwey up the front, but we saw that from the first race. They're not afraid to get their elbows out and get stuck in here.
No, Errol Verwey in particular, who made some good moves at the start of the earlier race, remember, so I expect him to be pretty feisty again here at the start, and Felix Rupert too, of course. Felix Rupert came from 3rd to 2nd in the previous race. Well, this time he is the man lining up on the outside of row 1. So in race 1, he got the better of Alexander Novikov. Now, though, the position's reversed slightly, although Novikov will be the one I think that's the most disappointed, really, because he's ended up only 5th. And again, Novikov ended up losing ground at the start of the previous race that he never really got back. A good qualifying effort on the front row for this race could have made all the difference for him, but instead, Alexander has to come from 5th on the grid. You can see him there tucked up in that sort of blue and red car on the inside of row number 1. The view here from the starting gantry overlooking the Kyalami circuit. Beautiful sunshine now is shining down on the track, and that will certainly have a bearing on the race, although tyre management, David, isn't quite such an issue in the GT3 cars. These GT3 cars with their lovely soft cushy traction control, it just means that the tyres don't deteriorate to quite the same level they would have done in the Super Trofeo cars. I mean, GT3 cars will regularly double, even triple stint their tyres in slightly cooler conditions, so that at least is one less thing for the drivers to have to worry about.
That's exactly it. It takes that worry off of them because, as I say, I've mentioned this a few times. The setup of this GT3 car is so balanced in comparison to the ST. It is really, really gentle on the tyres. But again, that's only if you drive it to within its capabilities. If you start overdriving that car, you're going to still face the same problems that you had in race 1, just not as extreme and not as immediate as you would have with the ST car. But certainly this GT3 Evo, it will still bite, and it will still bite hard, especially with the things like traction control, with the ABS and things like that, depending on the way these cars have been set up in terms of practice and things like that as well. It's all going to come down to what happens in these next 30 minutes, because not only do these drivers have to drive their own car and drive their own race, Andy, they've also got to be very, very wary that they don't get caught up in anybody else's race as well.
Yes, quite right. The first lap in particular can be fairly perilous for those that are starting a little bit deeper in the field. One other interesting point that I want to make before this race gets underway is that the 5th and final race of this mini-series in a couple of weeks' time is a open GT3 race here at Kyalami, so the drivers are free to pick whichever GT3 car they like for that race. For this one, it has to be the Lamborghini, but for that 5th race of the season, they can pick any GT3 car they like, and only a handful of them have gone for the Lamborghini. The reason I'm making this point is that clearly is because they feel good in the Lamborghini. They feel that is a car that they get on well with. Perhaps they're the drivers, therefore, that have spent a bit more time driving the Huracan and might be strong in this race. So quickly going down that list, Max Grime will be in a Lamborghini come week number 3. So too will Regan Mitchell. That's interesting. He's qualified quite well. Greg Van Nierkerk will be in a Lamborghini. So will David Dancer. And that's it. So only 4 drivers out there call themselves sort of Lamborghini specialists, and Regan Mitchell in particular, they're qualifying 6th on the grid. You can see him, the black and white car that will line up on the outside of row 3, the highest placed of those drivers, who clearly call Lamborghini one of their favourite GT3 cars. So this is a car you'd imagine Regan has quite a bit of virtual seat time in. Will that play to his advantage? Well, we're about to find out, because the field are working their way through the final sector now, 2 by 2 on this formation lap. It is Patrick Nage on pole position, and he will be desperate to try and hang on to the lead and get himself a race victory here. After race 1 didn't quite go to plan, he managed to salvage a really good lap from what was quite a scrappy qualifying session. But it doesn't really matter how scrappy your earlier efforts were. If you end up banging it on pole position, then that is good enough. And certainly for Patrick Nage, that is the place that he finds himself in. Felix Rupert, who was on his toes at the start of the earlier race, will be alongside him. Christian Lozanov and Errol Verwey make up the second row of the grid. Round number 2 of the Kyalami Mini Series, this time at the wheel of the Lamborghini Huracan GT3 Evos, is about to get underway. The red lights will go out. Now we're away and racing. Patrick Nage then from the inside of row number 1 tries to hold on to the advantage into the braking zone at turn 1. It's not been a great start though, so already looking up the inside is Christian Lozanov. To the outside somewhere is Felix Rupert, who gets through here first. It's going to be Rupert again with a brilliant start around the outside at turn number 1. He's got most of his car ahead, he's got his whole car ahead, and Felix Rupert gets the lead on the run up towards turn number 5 at Barbecue. A demon start. He is the king of starters here tonight. He's got the early advantage, and now Nage has to try and fight back immediately. Looks to the inside down towards Sunset. That's not really an overtaking position though, and so Rupert hangs on.
Oh my goodness me, we've got a 5-6 car incident all kicking off. In fact, we've got many more of that, possibly even 10 cars all involved in that. You can see just at the back there, we'll come back to this lead battle in a second. It's the 79, the 420, 448, the 222, all involved in that, and many more. I think that's the 57 involved back down there as well, as we see Max Grime. Oh no, it's back in it as well. Goodness me, we've got the 110 off as well. Josh Inman we saw caught up in that early moment, but back to his lead battle then. We've got a group of about 10 cars all in this this lead group just now, led round by Felix Rupert. Patrick Nage hustling that car, trying to get back in. Look at Regan Mitchell. You've got Lozanov trying to catch up as well. Verwey doing a great job. We've got a car going wide in the background there. That was Carlo Barbary get himself still into 9th place, and oh, that looked like a punt to pass if ever I saw one from Harry Phillips. My goodness me. Look, I guess, Andy, if you're going to do it, might as well make it as spectacular as possible. Just send a message.
It almost looked like Barbary hit the curb, such was the violence of the impact. So I'd like to see that again if we get a chance, because I'm not entirely sure quite what happened, honestly, but certainly the end result was that Barbary ended up off the road. Oh, and there's more chaos now as well. That's Novikov. That's Alexander Novikov has got around on the inside of turn number 1. Didn't quite spot the other car that went off with him. He was battling with Errol Verwey. Now, was it Verwey that went off with him? I'm not too sure. Absolute drama then at the start of lap number 2.
Well, nice to see that the calm and collected, cool nature of the ST races has been completely thrown out the window tonight with GT3 racing. This is exactly what I predicted was going to happen. The drivers feel much more comfortable with these cars, and they are just absolutely sending it left, right and centre. And I tell you what, race control, they might have been sitting with their tea and their biscuits for that first race. And there we go, penalty out already. Let's go and have a little nosy at what this is. Instant on lap 1 with cars 420 and 15. It's a drive-through penalty for car 420 for an unsafe rejoin. So that's Fadi Seder after a miserable race 1. It's all gone Pete Tong and lap 1.
Yes, and you could accuse Faddy of having had a slightly dodgy rejoin in the previous race, couldn't you? So this time around, someone else has been caught up in it, and a penalty has been handed out. Right, I think it might have been Gerhard Walzer maybe who tangled with Novikov, because those two have both dropped down the order together to 19th and 20th respectively. They are both still in the race, but that is obviously not good news, especially for Novikov, who was a good scorer in the previous race. We're going to see a replay now of what happened at turn number 1, possibly with Fadi Seder involved. On the outside there is the 420, and as they come out of the corner, whoa, the car twitches to the right, he floors it along the grass, and, well, yes, if that's not an unsafe rejoin, I don't know what is. And unfortunately, 2 or 3 other drivers get caught up. 57, David Fong is one of them. There's another car that was off in the barriers. Not the biggest shock that I've ever had to hear that a penalty was given out for that one. But Felix Rupert leads the way, by the way, from Patrick Nage in second. Regan Mitchell from 6th on the grid is 3rd, with Christian Lozanov having started 3rd, dropping down to 4th. Errol Verby also lost a place there at the expense of Mitchell to 5th position. Rob Taplin is 6th, Paquette is 7th, Harry Phillips is 8th, Carlo Barbary is 9th, and Dave Jr. is 10th. Lots to dissect after that first couple of laps, David.
I'm still kind of stuck on that incident of the 420 of Fadi Seder. I've got to be honest, I wouldn't be surprised to hear that race control considering changing that from an unsafe rejoin to straight up grievous bodily harm on that one. The 110 though, that is unfortunate for the 110 of Josh Inman, because it's an accident all of his own doing, and he's just overcooked that corner. The curbs are lava here at Kyalami, especially in high-speed corners. You touch them and it's a case of pick what wall you're going into, because that is where you're going to end up. And thankfully no damage done to that car. He'll get going again and still up into 23rd place. So Josh Inman, damage recovery, but very shortly he'll be onto the back of this battle here for 19th place.
Yes, Gerhard Walzer there trying to begin his recovery. More drama now. This was going into Crocodile. Oh, that was a big lunge actually up the inside. Nice move made. It's the Boots and Gignon car, isn't it? Who was that? That's Babaloo, isn't it? That's gone wide and bounces wide again on the grass. And there's a car that's spun in the background. That's number 12, Simon Wilkes, who ran quite strong actually in the previous race. I mean, you can see how lively the racing is here. They're definitely getting stuck in more in this race, I think, than they did in the previous one, and that is kind of what we expected, isn't it, with these slightly more user-friendly GT3 Huracans, so the drivers gain in a bit of confidence, maybe a little bit too much in one or two cases. Harry Phillips, 9th position, Carlo Barbary ahead of him in 8th, Dave Jr. right behind him in 9th place. They're also not that far behind the number 38 of Dominic Paquette. We've got another train forming here, haven't we? This has all of the hallmarks of a battle that's going to run throughout the race.
And that battle at the moment being led by the number 38 of Dominic Fouquet, doing a cracking job of actually sort of keeping himself out of trouble with that thing here. Chris Humphreys on the GRT Grasser racing team, I saw that Humphreys was being requested on the status of him early on in the broadcast there, and the status is that he is desperately trying to catch on to the back of this battle here between Chad Smith and Josh Inman, who's I want to say doing a decent job of trying to hold on with that 110, but realistically, I mean, he's really struggling to keep things on the straight and narrow under huge pressure from Chad Smith, as we see Denise Pope having a bit of an optimistic look up the inside, and she's well entitled to have a look up the inside there, because takes that position from Humphreys in the number 63. So Denise Pope absolutely out of nowhere. I've got to be honest, I think Humphreys has done his tires. So we see a car into the wall out the back last corner there. That is absolutely heartbreaking to see. It's just around and around and around. I think that is indeed Chad Smith.
Yes, you're right, it was 302 that's gone around, so yeah, that was unfortunate, but again, goes to show that even with all of the traction control in the world, you can still make mistakes. And of course the drivers have the option of upping or lowering the amount of traction control interference. The less traction control you run, the quicker you go, but the easier it is to spin the rear tyres, and that seems to have been what happened there. Right, back to the Barbary-Phillips battle. Harry Phillips looks pretty quick here, doesn't he? Harry has closed in on Barbary. He's got himself away from Dave Jr. Meanwhile, drive-through penalty being applied to Scott Ticehurst, who is running in 12th position. I don't think we've seen what that was for. It was contact with the 79 of Denise Pope. So Denise is a bit further down the order than Ticehurst, and now we know why, because there's been a bit of contact between the two of them. And this was on lap number 1. It's a sign, I think, of how much more eventful the opening lap of this race was, that we're nearly 10 minutes in here, David, and race control are still dissecting what happened on the first lap.
Yeah, they're definitely not getting a chance to enjoy their tea and biscuits in this race, I tell you, but it is what it is. You know, it was always going to happen, as we see Harry Phillips just overcooking that last corner there, trying to catch on to the back of Carlo Barbary there, but that leaves him into the grips of Dave Jr. Oh my goodness me! Greg Van Neerkerk absolutely spears Landreth there, and wow, I need to go and replace the batteries in my pacemaker. That was absolutely just a torpedo into the sides. And Goodness me, that I'll tell you what, race control are going to go absolutely furious at that, because they were warned about slowing down for yellow flags, and there was absolutely no slowing down there whatsoever.
Wow, I mean, I know this isn't real, I know this is a sim, but in that precise moment, I have to say, I jumped out of my chair there. That was just a sickening impact, and it is times like this we're thankful that this is a sim, because that would have hurt had that happened in real life. Yes, slowing down for the yellow flags is mandatory, and that is something that race control are definitely trying to come down on a little bit harder now, because it's something that I think in sim racing, perhaps because you don't have that danger level that you do in the real thing, drivers can sometimes be tempted to take liberties with yellow flags, but when there's a car broadside across the road, you really do have to slow down in anticipation of that. So more on that as and when we get it. Meanwhile, Harry Phillips hasn't yet got past Carlo Barbary, and as a result has been backed up into Dave Jr. again. These two had got away from Dave Jr. a bit on the previous lap, but they've been caught by him again. Dominic Fouquet getting a bit further ahead of them up the front, or just ahead of them at the front of the field. Felix Rupert is getting away now, but Regan Mitchell is second now. Did we see how that happened? I don't think we did. He's got himself ahead of Christian Lozanov very recently, I think, because they're absolutely together on track. Meanwhile, more turn one shenanigans. This is going to be possibly what one of our more recent penalties was about. Oh, there you can see the unsafe rejoin, and then there was a secondary incident which involved Scott Ticehurst, and then around went the 79 car then of Denise Pope. So that's what Ticehurst was given a penalty for, with Denise Pope spinning. But yes, David, Regan Mitchell into second place now then, ahead of Christian Lozanov. Let's see whether Regan can use all of that Lamborghini experience that he has to chase down the race leader.
Don't think he's got an answer, to be honest, because the lap times have been absolutely sensational from Felix Rupert. It's been personal best, and Veril Verwey on the curb and absolutely throwing the rear end of that thing all sorts of shapes right now. Amazing car control to hold on to that one for Seath Racing in the number 85 Lamborghini, hunting down Christian Lozanov. And you know, if anything shows the absolute dogged determination right now from Errol Verwey, it is that move right there, just holding on to that, literally taking every single ounce of tarmac that car can to hold on and try and get that position. This is up the inside here. Oh, this is going to be straight on. Yep. That is going to be a huge slap on the wrist from race control. Granted, it was absolutely unsighted, but the yellow flags would have come up and the drivers were warned to slow down, and I don't see any sign of that car slowing down whatsoever.
In his defence, Your Honour, he had just been overtaken under yellow flags, hadn't he? Which was the reason that he was unsighted. So he will claim, how successfully this claim is, I will find out, but he will claim that he couldn't see the car that was stranded because he'd just been overtaken illegally by somebody else. But yeah, there might be a couple of different sides to that story, unsurprisingly, really. Anyway, we shall find out what happens. Meanwhile, Scott Ticehurst is serving his drive-through penalty. That's why he's dropping down the order. And Regan Mitchell, David, is doing his best to prove you wrong here, because since we last mentioned it, he's taken 0.3 of a second out of Felix Rupert. This is the point I made earlier. You know, Regan clearly gets on well with this car. He's gapping Christian Lozanov. He's catching the race leader. He's already moved his way up from 6th on the grid to 2nd. Maybe the race win isn't actually all that impossible.
Certainly on the cards. I mean, we've got 17 minutes left to go. We've got another penalty through the cars, the 110 and the 21. That was Josh Inman, and the 21 of Andres Zafiritos. It's going to be a drive-through penalty for the 21 for unsafe rejoin. We didn't see that incident because that was obviously Josh Inman really struggling. Although, I mean, let's take a note of Inman's recovery drive here. He was in 23rd place. He's now up to 17th position. So, I mean, let's give the lad credit. That's a decent recovery drive and some good points for the championship.
Yeah, with a wounded car as well. We saw the front end of that car not looking very Lamborghini-ish anymore, so that's all the more impressive. He's got a bit of a gap now to Gerhard Walzer, who, by the way, has been overtaken by Alexander Novikov. Novikov is up into 15th place now, and that's about to become 14th place, because we're getting news of another drive-through penalty now, this time for Philip Babalal, who has been in the wars, bless him, hasn't he? This we're hearing, though, might be for track limits, so Well, he did go off, didn't he, down at the Crocodiles and sort of missed out turn 14 altogether. Clearly, he has exceeded track limits a few more times, so Babalol drops down the order. Novikov then gets back to 14th, and Gerhard Volzer back to 15th position. Novikov ain't going to win this race, David, at least I don't think he is, but if he can salvage a top 10 or even a top 12, that's a lot better than it looked like his race might be about 10 minutes ago.
He might not win it, but I tell you one man who very well might is Regan Mitchell. I'm going to eat all of my words in a big healthy dose of humble pie here, because that gap is coming down massively, and I wonder if Felix Rupert is starting to feel a little bit of the pressure here, because I'm really stunned at why that lap time is coming down so fast. He doesn't have anyone in front of him in terms of lap traffic or anything. Starting to go up a little bit there, so maybe just a little bit of a blip, maybe one of those laps that just wasn't working out for him. But certainly Regan Mitchell is applying the pressure here, and that gap was up to over a second, now down to, or was about 0.6 of a second there, halfway through the race though, and still I've got no idea where this is going to go.
I don't think Christian Lozanov knew where he was going then. He ran very wide coming out of Cheetah. That will definitely have been an exceeding of track limits incident, and it didn't really gain him anything, because Errol Verwey, who in the previous race spent the entire time defending, is now going on the attack. He's closed in on Christian Lozanov then, and the race 1 winner is now starting to feel the heat. He's already relinquished his second place to Regan Mitchell a couple of laps ago. Now he's desperately trying to hang on to this third position, but Verwey looks the quicker of the two now, doesn't he? He's really asking all the right questions of Lozanov, although this time it's Verwey that runs a bit wide out of the left-hander. Look how close the leaders are though. Regan Mitchell is almost up there with Felix Rupert now. The top two are just as close as the next two cars are that are fighting for third, but Regan Mitchell is closing at a vast rate of knots. He has closed in now to just 0.4 of a second behind the leader. Meanwhile though, David, another penalty, a time penalty this time, and this one is even more significant. This is for Alexander Novikov.
15-second time penalty being given to Novikov. That's for the contact with Gerhard Volzer on lap number 2. We saw that earlier on, and the car was sent spinning, so yeah, it's just not worked out. It's not been Novikov's day. That obviously will be applied at the end of the race, but that pretty much takes him out of the top 20. Disaster for Novikov, but I'm really intrigued to see how this battle for the lead is going, because Rupert now is going to have to be an absolute sponge to soak up all this pressure from Regan Mitchell, as is Christian Lozanov. Again, brilliant performance from Lozanov. He would happily take third place for the points in this Lamborghini GT3 Evo, but there could be some sparks ahead. Rupert and Mitchell could come to blows, and that could bring Lozanov and, let's not forget, Errol Verwey back into that lead fight very quickly.
And that will be why Verwey is all the more desperate to get through, because he can see that situation developing up front, and he really wants to be a part of it. And I do think he's quicker than Lozanov. If he could clear Christian, he might be able to start gapping him and getting after the top two, but getting past is not it's not an easy thing to do. It's a lot easier said than done. Flash past the old pit lane, then on the run up towards Sunset, turn through this quick right-hander. Don't forget Patrick Nage is still 5th. Nage was on pole position for this race, let's not forget, but dropped down to 5th in the early stages. 6th position then for Taplin, 7th Carlo Barbary, and then this is the fight for 8th. Dominic Fouquet and Harry Phillips still is on the attack, although having gained this 9th position a few laps ago, Philip has actually caught up to Fouquet pretty quickly. Can he find a way through though? You're not going to do it through the S's. A good exit from here though, and he might be able to have a go up at the top of the hill at turn 10 at Leukart. No, runs wide over the curbs and the grass, and that just allows Fouquet to get away.
2 yellow flags in quick succession there. David Fong in the 57 brings out the yellow flag at Sunset, and the 222. That is Pierre Stone, who has a huge moment there, and that was on the exit of the Crocodiles on the run down to Cheetah. So gets going again, but that is going to bring him into contention very quickly. Pierre Stone is going to get caught up by your leading 4 cars in about half a lap's time.
Yes, I think he probably is, isn't he? So that will add an extra dynamic to this race. On board with Verwey in 4th. He's dropped back a bit now from Lozanov. Interestingly, Regan Mitchell, having looked for all the world like he was going to catch and then breeze past Felix Rupert, hasn't, has he? He's sort of got stuck now behind the race leader, and this can happen, can't it? You arrive with all of that momentum, and if you don't immediately seize the advantage and drive straight through, you can sometimes end up getting sort of stuck at the pace of the car in front and lose all of your momentum. Whilst that's going on, there have been some dramas. Yes, there are the dramas. Josh Inman in his second incident of the race. This looks like it is at Cheetah, is it? No, yes, it's at the Crocodiles going into Cheetah, and Inman has brought a few friends into the gravel trap with him this time.
I don't think that was Inman, actually. I think that was somebody else's doing, and it was a dangerous redraw. Oh, and Novikov is off. It is a bad day from bad to worse for Novikov in that 369. He's into the wall, and oh my days, this is just... I mean, if that car retires, I would not be surprised. Thankfully, it keeps it going again, but Andy, I mean, on days like this... you just leave with your head in your hands.
Well, that's the frustration, isn't it, though, David? Because, you know, he should have been in the fight for the win. That's what he's thinking. He should have been in the fight for the win. Then he had that contact earlier on that dropped him down the order, started to fight back, then got a 15-second penalty. And at that point, you start driving like you've got nothing to lose. You're just annoyed with the world. You just want to gain as many places as you can. And you start overdriving and you make more mistakes. And it's that vicious circle again. And Alexander Novikov, though, you would expect better than that of him, you'd have to say. He's 19th now on the road, but on corrected times, he's going to be even further down the order. Because there's been quite a high attrition rate in this race, though, he might still scrape a few points together, so worth carrying on, even if the car is wounded. Right, Regan Mitchell is still harrying Felix Rupert for the race lead. He's not yet found a way through there, and they're now being caught by Christie and Lozanov in third. But, David, there are more penalties being handed out further back.
Race Control are just, I think Race Control are going to be having some nightmares about these Lamborghinis tonight. Right, 302 and the 24, that is Chad Smith, and the 24 of Venslav Rechinov is going to be a drive-through for car 24 for avoidable contact, and then the 77 and 999. Here's the rejoin. We'll come back to that penalty in a second. So that is the 110 then of Josh Inman. Oh no. I just get such a bad feeling about this. Yeah, that's it. He done, as they would say in the memes. He's done. Race Control will be absolutely furious at that. He's destroyed somebody else's race there. In fact, he's destroyed two other cars' race there. And yeah, I mean, that's just absolutely unforgivable.
Yes, and again, frustration. It's the word that it's become the buzzword tonight, hasn't it? That, but he was frustrated because he'd been tapped into a spin. The initial spin was not his fault. He was clearly tapped from behind, and there may well be a further penalty coming for the driver that instigated all of that. But then you just want, you know, that's the second time he's been pointing the wrong way in this race. Again, just wants to get going as quickly as he can. And you all know this feeling, David, I'm sure. Not that I'm suggesting that you find yourself pointing the wrong way on track that often, but you know what I mean. If you ever do find yourself pointing the wrong way on track, it feels like you've been there for an absolute age. You're watching all of these cars flash past you, and every second you spend stationary feels like an eternity.
Let's say in our ears, our producers are laughing their behinds off, saying that's a burn. But actually, I have been in that position. So
surely not, David.
Exactly. A couple of years ago, I was doing C1s at Silverstone during the middle of the night and was facing the wrong way through Maggots and Beckett's with loads of light streaming towards me, and that's exactly what happens. You're in a panic. You're thinking like second to second, and your only concentration is thinking, "Oh my God, please don't kill me here." But in that moment, you're still thinking about self-preservation as well. You're still thinking about not coming onto the track too soon. You want to wait for a gap in the traffic and to pull out. And it doesn't happen because every single one of these drivers have got a mini-map. They see where the cars are. They've got a spotter that's there, and Race Etiquette would hope that they're using the relative timing information as well to see when that happens. Certainly in every other platform, that's what you're encouraged to do. You're encouraged to get as much information before doing that rejoin as possible. So yeah, look, they know better at this than this at this point, and it won't be a defence from Race Control. But we did see a wonderful, wonderful move around the outside, and great to see that still, I mean, so many places up for grabs at this late stage in the race, and I don't think this battle for the lead is over yet.
No, although Regan Mitchell has been staring at the rear end of Felix Rupert's leading car for rather longer than he'd like now, and the trouble that he's going to have very soon is that he spent that long behind the race leader that he's actually going to start coming under pressure from Christian Lozanov behind, because Lozanov has sort of found a bit of a second wind here, hasn't he? He's started to close back in on the top two. He's bringing Errol Verwy with him, so these two pairs of cars that were dicing away at the head of the field, two for the lead, two for third, are about to come together and make a four-car train for the lead as we go into the final 5 minutes. And you know what? I'm absolutely okay with that, because that is going to give us a scintillating finish to the race. Look at the 1, 2, 3, 4 as they come out of the left-hander there at Clubhouse, down through the S's. Regan Mitchell is going to get a little bit desperate here, I think. He knows he's had the pace to close on Rupert. He just needs to get through before Lozanov really starts applying the pressure on him.
It's certainly going to be a wild end to the race. We've got more penalties coming in. Lap 11, the cars 110 and 48 drive through to car 48 for avoidable contact. That's Ian Harvey on the 110 of Josh Inman. So again, we're on lap 11. That's 3 laps ago. So race control almost imminently, I think, will be making a decision on Josh Inman there.
Yes, that's clearly the incident that they're looking at, isn't it? So, yeah, we'll await further news on that one. Right, Regan Mitchell running out of time. Just less than 5 minutes to go. And look, there's traffic ahead. Oh, and look who it is. That's Josh Inman. So Josh Inman having, I presume, pitted for repairs as well, because the front of that car looks a little bit nicer now than it did a few minutes ago. He's about to go a lap down to the race leaders. Let's hope that he's watching his mirrors and listening to his spotter, and most importantly taking note of the blue flags, because the last thing we want is a back marker getting in amongst all of this. It might be just the ticket for Regan Mitchell. It might be all he needs to get the race lead away from Rupert. Just a little bit of a distraction maybe for the race leader through the back marker. But it would be a shame, wouldn't it, if that lap car were to play a deciding role in this. 4 minutes left on the clock. Felix Rupert has led every lap of this race, but it is not over yet. Regan Mitchell is right with him. Christian Lozanov and Errol Verwy are not far behind. Patrick Nage is 5th, ahead of Rob Taplin 6th. Carlo Barbary is 7th. Dominic Fouquet in 8th. Harry Phillips 9th. And Dave Jr. Into the top 10 in this one in 10th position. Harvey, by the way, serving his drive-through penalty now. That's why he is dropping down the timing tower on the left-hand side of the screen. And one of the drivers that benefited, I think, was Gerhard Walzer, who continues to climb back up the order now. 14th after that earlier contact that he had with Novikov.
Just interesting to see as well, this lead battle, the 4 cars there, that's what, 1.5 seconds now, splitting up your top 4. So, I mean, this is setting up for an absolute barnstormer of a finish, as we see Harry Phillips here involved in his own battle, trying to hunt down Fouquet in the 38, also fighting off Dave Jr. Instant lap 11. Now, here we go. Cars 79 and 110 drive-through penalty for car 110 for an unsafe rejoin. I'll tell you what, he is a very lucky boy for that one. That could have been so much worse, but race control giving him a drive-through penalty for it. And this stage in the race, that's as good as dropping yourself out of the top 20 for sure. Back to this battle for the lead though now. They're starting to come on to some lap traffic and several lapped cars. This, Andy, is going to be an absolutely nail-biting finish to the race here.
Oh, and they're going to catch them at the worst point through Sunset and Clubhouse, and they're doing their best to try and stay out of the way, and there's contact there. That's where Regan Mitchell gets elbowed out wide by the back marker. Now, what does that mean? It means that Lozanov gets alongside him for second place into the left-hander defensive line taken by Regan Mitchell. Well, I thought maybe the traffic might play into his hands. It's done the exact opposite. As he tried to go around the outside of the slower car, it couldn't disappear, it couldn't get out of his way, and Regan Mitchell maybe could have left it a bit more breathing space. Somehow he still comes out of that with second position, but that was a scary moment for Regan Mitchell.
Oofed is all I can say to that one. That was a bit wild. Regan Mitchell now hunting back down on Felix Rupert, and they're going to have to do it all over again. And I'm trying to ID that car that was in the background there. I think that was the number 63 of Chris Humphreys that was caught up in that battle for the lead here, but it's all on Regan Mitchell for Sim Sport Racing. A very good evening to Sim Sport Racing. I know they're watching in the YouTube chat just now. Trying to hunt down on the entry to the final corner. I've got to be honest, this is not over yet. Felix Rupert is slower than Regan Mitchell. Certainly not on that last lap. That would have given about 0.4 of a second to Rupert, but Rupert losing half a second as well on that last lap there. So Lozanov and Verwey, I think, were the big winners on this. And again, would you believe it, that gap is now just 1.7 seconds from first to fourth place. But it looks like Lozanov making a mistake on that first corner there brings Earl Verwey back into the mix, and Verwey looking very, very dangerous right now.
Yes, I have to say, if I was Rupert Mitchell and I only lost 0.4 of a second after having contact with one of the fastest corners on the track a lap ago, I think I'd take that. The trouble is, we are now on the final lap of the race, and I don't think he's quite got the time to get back to the race leader. On board with Errol Verwey, grandstand view now of this. We're in fourth position here, looking ahead to the race leaders. On the inset, we're riding on board with the leader, Felix Rupert, so you can see what the view looks like from the front and back of this leading quartet of cars. Half a lap to go, running out of options now. There's no more traffic on the horizon either, barring any mistakes. I think this is likely to be the order, at least for the top two, although Verwey there just closing back in on Lozanov for third. Then the concertina effect stretches them back out again on the exit, down through the mine shaft. This is the fastest part of the circuit. You can see just how bumpy it is through there as well. Then hard onto the brakes into the crocodiles. The lead gap is back down again. Regan Mitchell is going to have one last swing at this. Can he get close enough to Felix Rupert to steal the victory away? I'm not sure he can. Out of Cheetah, up towards Ingwe, the final corner. It's not going to work for Regan Mitchell, and Felix Rupert, who was third, who was on the podium, I should say, in the earlier race, is going to go one better this time with a race victory in round number 2 of the Kyalami Mini Series. An absolute barnstormer there in the GT3 Evo Lamborghini Huracans. Regan Mitchell second, Lozanov third, Verwey fourth. And then behind, I believe there was time there, David, for one last bit of drama.
Yeah, unfortunately, what's happened is Just Loon in the 37 has saw the final corner, has got a little bit overexcited and spun the car and lost that final points position. So, yeah, that's not the best for Just.
Oh dear. Yes, might look back on that with a touch of regret, perhaps. Alan Hart here coming through in 13th position. The Barwell car, was that for position? It was, against Gerhard Volzer. He didn't quite get there. Or in fact, I think Volzer's got ahead of Hart there towards the end, and Hart was trying to come back at him. But those two were separated by virtually nothing. 65 1,000ths of a second at the line. Here comes the 48 of Ian Harvey. And he too is trying to scrape one more position out of this. This is Chad Smith ahead of him in the 302, but he's not quite going to get there. Battles boiling right down to the wire, from the very front to the very back of the field. A bit of a brutal race that, certainly a race of attrition. We had quite a few drivers that didn't make it to the end of the race, but those that did put on a cracking show from the start to the finish. I tell you what, I think this Kyalami Mini Series is going to keep us guessing right down to the end, isn't it? We've had two brilliant races tonight. Looking forward to more of the same over the next couple of weeks. But David Christie, what a race we've just been treated to.
And I don't know about yourself, I am absolutely exhausted after that second race there. A huge race, brilliant stuff. Just a reminder, folks, if you do value your safety, security and privacy online, check out our brand new partner for the year, ExpressVPN. You get 3 months free on a 12-month subscription, expressvpn.com/SimGrid. That's expressvpn.com. Grids. Yeah, what a race too that was. Again, we said right at the beginning, we thought the drivers were going to be a lot more comfortable, they were going to be a lot more aggressive, and they certainly were. They didn't disappoint. We had about 800% more incidents and decisions and penalties applied by race control there. It makes the STs look decidedly chill and reserved. But, I mean, yeah, brilliant stuff. Well-deserved win. And I've got to be honest, I think Felix Rupert will be very happy tonight.
Yes, because it's not just a race win, but he was on the podium earlier on as well. And he, I think, out of it all, has become one of the real championship favourites. I know it's a bit early to tell, but then I say that, we're almost actually halfway through this mini-series. Only 5 races, of course. So he's got to be up there as far as the points are concerned. and will be doubly happy then, because not only has he won a race, but he's also going to be taking a nice points haul away from the first 2 races. For those that haven't been quite so fortunate though, David, and I'm thinking in particular of Alexander Novikov, is he out of it in such a short season? Is it going to be possible for someone like Novikov to bounce back from the issues today? I mean, that's something that we'll both be watching for with interest as we move through the next couple of weeks. For now, though, let's turn our attention to our race winner. Felix Rupert has joined us here in the commentary box. I mean, what a race. We really enjoyed watching that. What was it like being a part of it?
It was very tense for sure. Very, very tense. My heart was beating like crazy until the last corner. But yeah, I'm glad I made it. All the times through cheat, I was very, very intense. I was only praying to survive, and yeah, I did it.
I mean, it was a brilliant drive, but you did have a bit of a gap in the early part of the race, didn't you? But then Regan is just so quick. He's obviously very strong in this car. Were you worried when you saw how quick he was that he might be able to find a way past you?
Indeed, yes. I was very worried, yes. I was, at first, when I had the gap, as you said, I was thinking, could be a pretty chill race, but you can never know. But then when I saw that he had the pace over me, it was just about being consistent, making no mistakes, keeping him behind me. I think I also had better straight line speed because he wasn't really catching on the straight. So yeah, it was just about not making mistakes really.
Now that's interesting then. So slightly different setup maybe that was helping you there. Let's talk about the championship then, because you've had a good night. Obviously a win here, a podium in race 1. So I guess you've got to be feeling good as far as the points go now.
Yeah, I am, yes. I wasn't expecting that to finish on P2 and P1. So yeah, it has been pretty good days so far. It's over now, so I hope I can repeat that next week and then should be looking pretty good.
How confident are you in the Porsches though? A very different car, isn't it? So do you think you can continue this performance next week?
Well, I am a pretty big fan of the Porsche car, I have to say, especially at Kyalami. It's a very nice car to drive. At others it's not very fun, but at Kyalami it's a lot of fun, I think. And the GT4 is also, I would also say that I'm pretty decent with this car, so yeah, it should be fine, I think.
Okay, well, we're looking forward to seeing how you get on next week, but for now, Felix, congratulations on a really strong night.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Have a good day.
Felix Rupert then takes himself a race victory and a second place, and David Christie, I think, amidst all of the drama and the chaos and confusion, that's not been a bad night's work. And there you can see confirmation actually of the points. So Felix Rupert is leading the way. He has Aston Martin next to his name because that's the car that he will be driving in that GT3 Open GT3 race at the end of the season, just for reference. Same goes for all of the other drivers. So it's Rupert that leads on 92 points. That's a 6-point lead over Christian Lozanov in second. Regan Mitchell, that race 2 second place, puts him in third position, with Errol Verby fourth and Rob Taplin, Mr. Consistent there, 2 sixth places, put him in fifth. Looking further down the order, Alexander Novikov, the one that we really need to draw some attention to because he was third in the first race, 31st in the second, so he is only 9th in the championship on 36 points, David. He is a long way behind the leaders.
That's right, and with 150 points or so left to go in the championship over the remaining 3 races, it makes it so much more important to have that consistency. Huge opening round there for him to get the 92 points. I mean, it's absolutely fantastic for the 71 driver of Felix Rupert. It's definitely not all over yet, but I think Novikov has pretty much torpedoed his chances of the championship in that race 2 alone. Again, a huge thank you to all of our commercial partners for making these events happen and making sure that we can bring you the best possible events in sim racing, especially to Coach Dave Academy, coachdavacademy.com. They do esports, professionally developed esports setups, but even more important than that is their new offering of one-to-one driving coaching for some of the biggest names in GT3 racing. You can see them there: David Perel, Nick Foster, Jordan Pepper. You can get one-on-one tuition, or you can get video tuition from them as well. Amazing opportunity. I would argue even more important than the setups that they offer as well. To Thrustmaster, who have some of the finest range of sim racing hardware and equipment on the market. Your boy is, for transparency, a complete Thrustmaster fanboy with a T300 RS and TLCM pedals, and I've got to be honest, they've completely changed how I'm able to perform in sim racing. Had the T150 before, and the T300 is just absolutely amazing. There we go. That's the bills paid for another week, Andy. I've got to be honest, I can't believe it's so long since we've actually got our first opportunity to work together.
I know, and you're going to be sick of the sound of my voice by the end of the next couple of months, because we're working together on a number of things here on the SimGrid. Really looking forward to that. And I tell you what, I'm even making my way up to Knock Hill in a few weeks, so I'll have a chance to meet in person again for the first time in quite a while. What do you reckon though, David? Should we do this all again next week? I think we probably should. We've got more racing coming your way in the Kyalami Mini Series. We go from Italy to Germany as far as the cars are concerned next week, with 2 races for Porsches. The 991 GT3 Cup car will make up our first race next week, before we then move into the GT4 realms with the 718 Cayman GT4 for race number 2, and then the week after that will be the grand finale, the Open GT3 race. You won't want to miss that. My thanks to everyone on the SimGrid team for all of their help as usual putting the broadcast together. Thanks also to David Christie for his wonderful job up here in the virtual comms box with me. We'll be back same time, same place next week for more brilliant racing from Kyalami. Thank you for your company. We'll see you again next time.